In the shadows of history, there are stories that refuse to be explained, whispers from the past that still haunt our world today. Places where time stands still and events defy all logic. From vanished civilizations to unsolved disappearances, the mysteries that have shaped humanity are as chilling as they are captivating. What happened to those who vanished without a trace? What dark secrets lie buried beneath ancient ruins? These are not just legends. They are questions that have lingered for centuries. So sit back, relax, and let's uncover 3 hours of history's most strange and haunting mysteries. In the late 18th century, a dark cloud of fear descended upon the streets of London, a city already brimming with its own unique brand of chaos. It was the year 1788, and a strange and inexplicable series of events began to unfold. Events that would come to be known as the Great London Monster Panic. It started with whispers, rumors of a mysterious figure stalking the shadows. Soon these whispers evolved into something more tangible, more terrifying. A city, already on edge with political and social unrest, found itself gripped by a chilling, unseen terror. The panic began quietly enough. Women, and sometimes children, claimed they had been accosted by a figure. A monster, they called it. Descriptions were vague, but the terror in their eyes was unmistakable. Some spoke of a tall, shadowy figure, others of an unearthly, spectral presence. Yet all shared one common element. The attacker was said to be a man dressed in strange, monstrous clothing, or even resembling an animal. The accounts varied, but the fear was the same. And soon these tales began to spread. The victims, most of them young women, were seemingly assaulted by the mysterious figure in the streets of London. Their descriptions, when they could give them, were inconsistent. Some said they were grabbed or groped. Others claimed they were simply terrorized or molested by the creature in the dark. The attacks, however, were not consistent with the behavior of a normal criminal. The assaults appeared to have an element of performance, as if the perpetrator was playing a role, or perhaps even enjoying the terror he caused. As the stories spread, so did the theories. The most common explanation offered by authorities was that these were merely exaggerated reports, hysteria or mass delusion among the public, triggered by the overcrowded, disease-ridden conditions of the city. After all, London in the late 18th century was a place of contradiction, where the elite lived within the splendor of grand Georgian estates, while the working class and the poor were forced to survive in filthy slums, crammed together in a city that lacked the most basic infrastructure. But was it simply hysteria? Or was something far darker at play? As time passed, the authorities became more involved and a strange transformation took place. The attacks began to grow in frequency, and the description of the so-called monster began to shift, growing more fantastical. Some claimed that the figure had horns. Others insisted it wore a strange, eerie mask. Was it the product of a fevered imagination, or was there something far more troubling happening in the heart of London? Then, in 1790, the panic reached its peak. A man was arrested for allegedly being the London Monster, but his trial only added to the confusion. His name was James Mallister, and he was quickly accused of being the source of the widespread fear. However, when the trial began, it was clear that the case was more complicated than it seemed. The testimonies against Mallister were inconsistent, and many began to question whether he was truly the monster who had terrorized London, or simply a scapegoat in a larger, more inexplicable event. Some even wondered whether the attacks were the work of multiple perpetrators, or perhaps a group of people, each playing their part in the collective hysteria. And still, the question remains, was there ever truly a London monster at all? Or was it the manifestation of a darker fear, one rooted in the anxieties of an era, an age in which social and political upheaval bred suspicion and paranoia? Did the people of London truly encounter something out of the ordinary? Or did the fear itself create the monster? The panic faded as quickly as it had begun, leaving behind more questions than answers. No definitive conclusion was ever reached. The case was left unresolved, and the monster faded into the fog of history. Yet the lingering mystery persists. What was the true source of the panic that gripped London in those years? Was it the work of a single deranged mind, or did something far more mysterious stir within the streets of one of the world's greatest cities? As we continue to look back at this strange chapter of London's past, one thing is clear. The truth remains just out of reach, and perhaps, in the end, it is the mystery itself that has endured. As the 15th century drew to a close, the Tudor dynasty found itself standing on the precipice of greatness. In 1502, it seemed the crown of England would pass seamlessly from King Henry VII to his eldest son, Prince Arthur Tudor. The young prince was not only the heir to the throne, but also a symbol of the Tudor family's bright future. His marriage to Catherine of Aragon, daughter of the King of Spain, was to solidify a powerful European alliance. The stage was set for Arthur to inherit an empire, until, in a single tragic moment, his life came to a sudden and mysterious end. It was a death that would ripple across history, casting long shadows of speculation and intrigue. Arthur, just 15 years old, died in the early months of 1502, under circumstances that remain elusive to this day. His sudden passing was officially attributed to a sweating sickness, a deadly and virulent illness that had been sweeping through Europe at the time. Yet, as history tells us, this explanation has never fully satisfied those who have sought to understand the true cause of his death. Arthur's death occurred at Ludlow Castle, an ancient fortress perched above the River Severn, where he had been overseeing the Welsh borders as part of his royal duties. The castle, surrounded by misty hills and dense forests, exudes an eerie quietness, the sort of place where time seems to slow down. The stillness of the location only deepens the mystery surrounding the prince's final days. At the time of his passing, Arthur had been ill for several days, experiencing the fever and sweating that were typical of the disease that had swept across England. His death was swift, and his body was soon embalmed, though no autopsy was performed. The suddenness of his death shocked the court, but it was the aftermath that stirred suspicion. Why did this seemingly healthy young man succumb to such a feverish affliction so quickly? Could there have been something more to his demise than a simple illness? Mainstream history has always pointed to the sweating sickness, a highly contagious and deadly disease that struck England in periodic outbreaks during the late 15th century. The symptoms were rapid and severe, a sudden fever, followed by intense sweating, then collapse, and, in many cases, death. The fact that other victims of this disease had died similarly would seem to support this theory. But as with many events in history, the narrative is never as clear-cut as it seems. Some historians have suggested that the disease was simply the victim of a poor understanding of medical science in the 16th century, and that other factors, perhaps a weakened immune system or stress from his royal duties, might have played a role. But questions remain. Could the cause of his death have been something more insidious? A political conspiracy, perhaps, aimed at eliminating a potential rival or preventing a royal marriage that would have consolidated power? In the years since, rumors of foul play have persisted. Was Arthur's death the result of poisoning? Some have wondered whether his future father-in-law, King Ferdinand of Aragon, might have had a hand in his demise to ensure that his daughter, Catherine, would marry the younger brother, Henry, who would later become Henry VIII. This theory is supported by the fact that Arthur's sudden death led to a quick reorientation of the royal marriage plans, with Catherine eventually marrying Henry after Arthur's brother ascended to the throne. Others have speculated that the prince's death may have been linked to a family history of illness, particularly given the high infant mortality rate of the time and the apparent health problems that plagued other members of the Tudor family. Was there a hereditary condition, perhaps a genetic disorder, that led to Arthur's premature death? Or could a combination of the pressures of his role as heir and the stresses of royal life have contributed to his sudden collapse? There is also the unsettling possibility that Arthur was the victim of something more supernatural or inexplicable. At the time, the Tudor court was rife with intrigue, and the tension between the old and new monarchies created an atmosphere where conspiracies flourished. Some even whisper of dark magic or the influence of courtly enemies who sought to eliminate a young, ambitious prince. In an age where politics and personal ambitions often merged into dangerous plots, it's not entirely outside the realm of possibility to consider such theories, though they remain speculative at best. The question remains, what really caused Prince Arthur's death? Was it truly the sweating sickness that claimed his life? Or was there something more sinister at play, whether the result of disease, royal intrigue, or even the hand of fate itself? As we look back at the prince's untimely death, one can't help but wonder how different history might have been if Arthur had survived. Would he have been able to forge the powerful alliances his father envisioned? Or would his untimely passing have set the stage for his younger brother, Henry, to take the throne and change the course of English history forever? The true cause of his death remains one of history's most haunting and unanswered questions, a riddle buried deep within the annals of the Tudor dynasty, just as elusive as the mist that once enveloped Ludlow Castle. And as we delve deeper into the past, one cannot help but wonder, what other secrets remain hidden beneath the surface of this strange, tragic death? As the 12th century unfolded, the region of Brittany in northwestern France was a place of political tension and shifting allegiances, a land where the echoes of ancient Celtic kingdoms still resonated amidst the burgeoning power of medieval France. It was a time when royal lines were often fragile and the stakes for power were high. In the midst of this turbulent landscape, a tragic and perplexing mystery would emerge: the disappearance of the Princes of Brittany. The year was 1173, and the two young sons of Duke Conan IV of Brittany, who would come to be known as the Princes of Brittany, vanished under circumstances that have left historians baffled ever since. Their names were Hoel and his brother, the younger Arthur. The two boys were last seen playing in the vicinity of their family's estate, the impressive Château de la Roche-Bernard, an imposing fortress overlooking the river Vilaine, its tall stone walls guarding both the Duke's family and the turbulent political affairs of the region. The castle itself was an atmospheric place, looming over the forested landscape, where the constant hum of the river below provided a soundtrack to the otherwise eerie stillness of the stone keep. In those days, the castle would have been bustling with the activities of court life: guards marching in the courtyard, servants running errands, noblemen engaging in quiet discussions over matters of power. But amidst this normalcy, something darker loomed. The two princes disappeared into that very quiet, vanishing without a trace, leaving only questions behind. The initial theories surrounding their disappearance were simple. Some believed that the boys had wandered off into the surrounding forests, perhaps getting lost in the dense woods or falling victim to wild animals. Others, particularly those close to the Duke, speculated that they had been abducted, though by whom and for what purpose was unclear. After all, Brittany was a volatile region at the time, with political intrigue and rivalries rife within the court. But as the months stretched on, the mystery deepened. The disappearance was not just an unfortunate event, but a haunting puzzle that failed to yield any definitive answers. Then came the whispers. Whispers of darker deeds, of a plot far more sinister than a mere abduction. Rumors began to circulate that the boys had been taken under the command of none other than their own uncle, Geoffrey Plantagenet, the brother of the King of England, Henry II. Geoffrey had long coveted the Duchy of Brittany, and some believed that the young princes had been removed from the picture to clear the way for his own claim to the region. The story of Geoffrey's possible involvement is not just speculation. In 1173, Geoffrey was embroiled in a rebellion against his own brother, Henry II, and had designs on expanding his influence. Could he have seen the two boys as a threat to his ambitions? Or had he ordered their disappearance to further secure his hold on the region? The idea of a powerful noble family disposing of their own blood relatives to further their political gains was hardly unheard of in medieval Europe. The Plantagenets themselves were notorious for their ruthless pursuit of power, and yet the truth remains elusive. As the years passed, the mystery surrounding the princes only grew, with little to no information emerging about their whereabouts. No bodies were ever found, and no credible evidence ever surfaced to point to their ultimate fate. There were even rumors that the boys had been seen in distant lands, perhaps hidden away in secret locations, their identities concealed by loyal servants or allies. Some said they had been taken to England, others whispered of far-flung corners of France or even Spain. But these were little more than idle tales, adding only to the aura of confusion and intrigue. By the end of the 12th century, the Princes of Brittany had become little more than figures in a ghost story, their fate a puzzle wrapped in the shadowy corners of history. But their disappearance was far from forgotten. In fact, it would continue to haunt the region for generations to come. The people of Brittany, known for their fierce independence and proud Celtic heritage, refused to let go of the mystery, and many still believed that the princes would one day return, that their disappearance was part of a larger, more complex scheme, one involving betrayals, hidden loyalties, and a kingdom on the brink of collapse. The most chilling aspect of their disappearance is perhaps the sheer lack of evidence. Were the princes really victims of an internal power struggle, or did something else happen? Could they have been taken by unknown assailants, or was it, as some have suggested, a case of their own family members seeking to erase them from the royal line? The lack of evidence led some to propose even more unusual theories. Was it possible that the princes had fallen victim to a political assassination, one so expertly carried out that even their bodies had been disposed of without a trace? Could they have been secreted away by a faction of nobles who had a vested interest in keeping them hidden, perhaps as pawns in a larger game of political maneuvering? Or perhaps most unsettling of all, was there something supernatural at play? An ancient curse on the family, or perhaps some otherworldly force that claimed the young princes for reasons beyond the comprehension of mortal men? Over the centuries, the mystery of the Princes of Brittany has taken on a life of its own, with countless theories swirling around their fate. Yet, despite all the speculation, no definitive answers have ever emerged. The disappearance of the princes remains one of the most unsettling mysteries of medieval France, a story shrouded in secrecy and speculation, its true resolution perhaps forever hidden in the mists of time. Was it simply a tragic case of children lost to the perils of a turbulent age, or was their disappearance the result of a deeper, darker conspiracy, one that involved not only their family, but the fate of a kingdom? As the years pass, the mystery of the Princes of Brittany continues to linger, unanswered, leaving us to wonder, what really happened to the young heirs to a duchy that was never meant to be theirs? And will we ever truly know the truth? As the 16th century drew to a close, the world was on the brink of profound change. Europe was exploring new territories, and the idea of colonization was taking root across the vast, unknown expanses of the New World. In 1587, a group of English settlers, led by John White, established a colony on Roanoke Island in what is now North Carolina. They set about building a new life in the wilderness of the American continent. But what happened to them would become one of the greatest mysteries of early American history. The colony would be known as the Lost Colony, a settlement that vanished without a trace. By 1588, tensions were mounting in England. The Spanish Armada loomed off the coast, and Queen Elizabeth I's kingdom was embroiled in conflict with Spain. Amidst this chaos, the Roanoke colony needed its supplies, and so John White, having returned to England for more provisions, was tasked with gathering a supply fleet to bring much-needed resources back to the struggling settlers. His mission was simple: to bring reinforcements, food, tools, and men. The fate of the colony depended on it. White set sail in 1590, but what he found when he arrived was nothing short of baffling. Upon reaching Roanoke, the supply ships were greeted by an eerie silence. The settlement, which had once been a bustling colony, was completely abandoned. The wooden structures were still standing, but the homes were empty. There was no sign of the settlers, no bodies, no footprints, not even the faintest trace of their existence. Only one clue remained: the word Croatoan carved into a post, and Crow etched into a tree nearby. The word Croatoan referred to a nearby island, which was home to a Native American tribe of the same name. Was this a clue, a message left behind by the settlers, or was it simply a coincidental carving? The mystery of what happened to the settlers has confounded historians, archaeologists, and theorists for centuries, with no conclusive answers emerging from the smoke of time. Theories regarding the fate of the lost colony have run the gamut, from the plausible to the wildly speculative. Some believe that the settlers were victims of a harsh and unforgiving wilderness, disease, starvation, or perhaps an attack by local Native American tribes could have driven them to their deaths. The sudden absence of the settlers has been attributed to a lack of preparation for the harsh conditions of the New World. Others believe that the settlers may have been absorbed into the local Croatoan tribe, either through voluntary migration or forced relocation. After all, the carving of Croatoan on the post suggested that the settlers may have intended to move there, though why they never left a more concrete message remains unclear. Then there are the darker, more speculative theories that suggest the settlers met a more violent end. Was the colony destroyed by a Spanish attack? While there's no direct evidence to support this claim, the possibility of Spanish forces arriving on the shores of Roanoke, seeking to eradicate an English foothold in the New World, cannot be dismissed entirely. At the time, Spain and England were locked in a bitter struggle for dominance, and the Spanish certainly had the resources to launch such an assault. But again, no such evidence has ever been found to corroborate this theory. And then there's the most haunting theory of all, that the settlers of Roanoke vanished without a trace, swept away by something inexplicable, perhaps something beyond the scope of ordinary historical events. Could they have been taken by some form of supernatural force? The idea of entire populations vanishing, leaving no remnants of their existence, is a concept that has haunted human imagination for centuries. Did the settlers, in some inexplicable way, vanish from the face of the earth? The Croatoan theory remains one of the most widely accepted explanations, though it, too, leaves many questions unanswered. It suggests that the settlers, facing an increasingly hostile environment, chose to move to the island, possibly for their own survival. But why then would they leave such a cryptic clue? Wouldn't they have left behind more explicit instructions for their rescuers to follow? And if they had indeed gone to Croatoan, why was there no further sign of them there when White's men searched the island and surrounding area? Perhaps one of the most unsettling aspects of the story is that it was never resolved. White, unable to search further due to a shortage of time and resources, was forced to return to England, leaving Roanoke behind in an unsettling state of uncertainty. And when he did finally return in 1591, the colony was still gone. The mystery remains unsolved, the answers still locked away, buried beneath layers of time and speculation. Over the centuries, various expeditions have been launched to uncover what truly happened to the lost colony, but none have yielded conclusive results. Artifacts have been found, and some researchers claim to have found evidence of the settlers' presence, but nothing that can definitively explain their disappearance. There are even theories that suggest the settlers may have left behind clues in other forms, in their art or pottery, or even in the very landscape of Roanoke Island itself, clues that remain hidden, waiting to be uncovered. And then there is the possibility that the mystery of the lost colony has simply become too tangled in myth and legend to ever be fully understood. The word Croatoan remains the only tangible piece of evidence left behind, but even that, when examined under the lens of time, remains an enigmatic marker. What did it mean? Was it a desperate plea for rescue, a signpost for safety, or something more cryptic? The vanishing of the lost colony of Roanoke is more than just a historical puzzle. It's a question about the limits of what we can understand about the past. Could there be a simple, logical explanation that we just haven't uncovered yet? Or is it possible that the answer lies somewhere beyond the scope of recorded history, in the gray spaces where myth and reality collide? The fate of those settlers remains an open question, a haunting echo of a vanished world. What truly happened to the lost colony of Roanoke? Were they abandoned, assimilated, or destroyed? As time marches on, the answers slip further away, just out of reach, leaving only the whisper of Croatoan and the mystery that continues to mystify and intrigue. As the 17th century stretched across the vast horizons of the New World, the French set their sights on the wilderness of the Great Lakes, eager to expand their empire in North America. In 1679, a ship named Le Griffon was constructed in the heart of this unexplored land, a vessel designed to navigate the treacherous waters of Lake Michigan, built by the French explorer René Robert Cavelier, Sieur de La Salle. Its mission was clear: to help establish French dominion over the region, secure trade routes, and open the frontier for further exploration. But the fate of Le Griffon remains one of the most chilling mysteries in maritime history, for the ship vanished without a trace, and with it, any answers about what happened to it. Le Griffon was no ordinary ship. At 45 tons, it was the largest vessel ever built on the Great Lakes at the time, a towering testament to human ambition and ingenuity. Its construction was an ambitious endeavor, carried out by a group of French settlers and Native American allies, who toiled in the wilds of the American frontier. The ship was designed for the unforgiving conditions of the Great Lakes. Its purpose was to carry supplies, facilitate trade, and act as a symbol of French power in a largely untamed region. In August of 1679, the ship was completed. La Salle and his crew loaded it with trade goods, prepared for the long journey south to the Illinois River. The plan was to sail Le Griffon along the shores of Lake Michigan, reaching the mouth of the river, where it would establish a trading post. It was a bold mission, one that held the promise of untold wealth, but also one fraught with danger, treacherous waters, hostile indigenous groups, and the unpredictability of the elements. La Salle, undeterred by these risks, entrusted the ship to a trusted captain, Pierre Duluth, who had proven himself in these harsh environments. The ship set sail in late August, and as Le Griffon cut through the waters of Lake Michigan, it became one of the first vessels to truly navigate the vast expanse of the Great Lakes with ease. But the success of its voyage would be short-lived. After leaving the mouth of the river, La Salle was forced to return to Fort Frontenac, leaving Le Griffon and its crew behind. When he returned to collect his ship several months later, Le Griffon had disappeared. No sign of it had been found. No wreckage. No survivors. It was as if the ship had simply vanished from the face of the earth. The disappearance of Le Griffon remains one of the most enduring and perplexing mysteries in the history of maritime exploration. Theories regarding what happened to the ship have run the gamut from plausible to speculative, and none have been conclusively proven. Some suggest that Le Griffon met a tragic end due to the unforgiving conditions of the Great Lakes, where violent storms, unpredictable currents, and harsh winds could easily capsize a ship. It is well known that the region is prone to sudden, violent squalls, and many ships have met their end in these waters. Could Le Griffon have been caught in such a storm, its crew lost to the waves? Yet, the wreck of Le Griffon has never been found. Ships sunk by storms are often discovered eventually, their remains lying on the lakebed, their stories told in the twisted ruins of their once proud hulls. But Le Griffon left no such traces. No wreckage was ever located, even after repeated searches. Could it have been destroyed so completely that no evidence of it remained? Or is it possible that the ship was lost under more unusual circumstances? Other theories suggest that the disappearance of Le Griffon was the result of human intervention, an act of sabotage, perhaps. Could the ship have been attacked by hostile Native American tribes? The Great Lakes region was home to many different groups, some of whom were engaged in trade with the French, while others were more wary of European encroachment. The question remains, did an ambush occur, and did those who opposed French colonization take the ship by force? Yet, there is no concrete evidence to suggest this either. The historical records offer no signs of violent confrontation between La Salle's expedition and the indigenous tribes in the area. Another possibility is that Le Griffon was scuttled intentionally, either by its crew or by those who sought to cover up a mistake or a loss of valuable cargo. Could there have been a betrayal, a dispute over La Salle's leadership, or even a hidden agenda among the crew that led to the ship's deliberate destruction? Some suggest that the crew may have encountered insurmountable obstacles, leading to a decision to abandon the ship rather than risk it falling into enemy hands or failing its mission. And then, there is the most mysterious theory of all, that Le Griffon did not meet its end at all, but instead simply disappeared into a different plane of existence. Over the years, there have been rumors of ghost ships, of vessels lost to time, their locations shifting with the winds and the tides. Could Le Griffon have become one of these spectral ships, its disappearance linked to some inexplicable, otherworldly force? Such theories belong more to the realm of legend than historical fact, yet the lack of any tangible evidence has allowed the mystery to linger, leaving space for the unknown to seep into the narrative. Perhaps the most frustrating aspect of this mystery is the fact that Le Griffon is, in many ways, lost to time. The ship was built with the hope of securing France's place in the New World, but instead, it became an emblem of the uncertainty that characterized the early days of European colonization. We are left to wonder, did Le Griffon sink beneath the churning waters of Lake Michigan, its crew swallowed by the very wilderness they sought to tame? Or did it vanish in some other way, caught in the intersection of ambition, fate, and the vast unknown of the Great Lakes? Despite numerous searches and investigations over the centuries, the truth remains elusive. Le Griffon has never been found, and its disappearance continues to confound historians, archaeologists, and explorers alike. The answers, if they exist, remain buried beneath the waters of Lake Michigan, waiting to be discovered, or perhaps never to be discovered at all. What really happened to Le Griffon? Was it the result of a natural disaster, a human error, or something more mysterious? As the centuries pass, the ship's fate slips further into the fog of history, leaving behind only the question, is the final chapter of Le Griffon still waiting to be written, or is it lost forever, hidden beneath the waves of time? As the mist rolled over the stone walls of Berkeley Castle in Gloucestershire, England, in the early 14th century, a dark and perplexing tale began to take shape. A tale that would leave a stain on the annals of English history for centuries to come. The death of King Edward II in 1327 remains one of the most mysterious and controversial events in the history of the English monarchy. His passing, shrouded in uncertainty, has sparked rumors, whispers of foul play, and theories that still haunt historical discourse today. Edward II had been a king caught in the turbulence of a fractured and unstable reign. His rule was marked by military defeats, internal dissent, and bitter power struggles. His relationship with his powerful favorites, particularly Piers Gaveston, and his inability to control his nobles and assert his authority led to widespread unrest. In the midst of this chaos, the king's downfall seemed inevitable. In 1327, a coup led by his wife, Queen Isabella, and her lover, Roger Mortimer, forced Edward to abdicate. The crown was passed to his young son, Edward III, but it was his father's fate that would become the source of dark speculation. Edward II was imprisoned in Berkeley Castle, a remote and imposing fortress set against the rolling hills of Gloucestershire. The castle's thick stone walls, its high towers, and its shadowed halls created an oppressive atmosphere, one that would become the backdrop for the final, tragic chapter of the king's life. Here, in the heart of this medieval stronghold, the details of Edward's death have remained elusive, leaving behind a legacy of intrigue and unresolved questions. The official story is that he died in captivity on September 21st, 1327, allegedly of natural causes, consumed by illness, grief, and despair. But was this truly the case? The circumstances surrounding Edward's death have always been a source of suspicion. The most widely accepted version, provided by those in power at the time, claimed that he died from the effects of a violent fever. However, as with many events in history, this version seems to have been crafted to fit a narrative that the authorities wished to present. No immediate medical records from the time exist, and details about the king's condition are scant. What's more, the fact that Edward was known to be a man of robust health before his imprisonment further raises questions. Could a man who had once led armies and been a force of nature in his youth truly succumb to a sudden illness with no clear explanation? The mystery deepened in the years following Edward's death, when rumors began to circulate that his passing was not from natural causes at all. A story emerged that would continue to fascinate and disturb historians to this day: the theory that Edward II had been murdered. The method of his alleged execution remains one of the most debated aspects of the case. The most famous and most chilling of these theories suggests that Edward's death was no mere illness, but that he was killed by a gruesome and highly unusual method, being suffocated with a red-hot poker. According to the tale, the Queen and Mortimer, having conspired to eliminate the former king, ordered that he be executed in a cruel and symbolic fashion in order to ensure that his death would not raise questions about its legitimacy. The red-hot poker theory posits that a large burning iron was inserted into Edward's body, a horrifying act that would have left no visible wounds, but would have been fatal nonetheless. This method, though gruesome, would also have left behind no traceable evidence, allowing the conspirators to maintain their control and avoid further suspicion. Yet, this theory has never been substantiated by concrete evidence. No contemporary sources mention the method of Edward's death in such detail, and the idea of a red-hot poker being used to kill the king may have simply been a later invention, meant to explain away the puzzling and contradictory nature of the king's demise. The first known reference to the theory of the poker comes from a chronicler who wrote decades after the events in question, raising doubts about its reliability. Moreover, the historical records of the time, though sparse, suggest that Edward's death was initially treated as a natural one, with no immediate investigation or inquiry into the cause of death. Why would the authorities have been so quick to accept the official story? And why, if there was any truth to the idea of a foul play, was there no immediate effort to investigate the circumstances surrounding his passing? These questions continue to cast a shadow of doubt over the accepted narrative. One alternative theory is that Edward did not die at Berkeley Castle at all. In this version of events, it suggested that the king was smuggled out of the castle after his apparent death, hidden away by loyal supporters, and allowed to live out his days in obscurity. Some have pointed to the sudden disappearance of his body as a possible sign that his death was staged. The idea that Edward might have survived and lived secretly in exile has become the subject of several historical novels and speculative accounts. Was this a clever ruse to protect the king from his enemies? Or were there others in the court who sought to protect the monarch from an untimely and violent death? As time passed, the mystery only deepened. Theories about Edward II's death began to take on a life of their own, each with its own set of explanations. Some suggested that the king had been secretly poisoned, while others proposed that he had died as a result of extreme mental anguish or depression, brought on by his long confinement and loss of power. Still, no definitive evidence has ever emerged to prove any of these theories beyond a reasonable doubt. What we are left with, then, is the unsettling truth that we may never know exactly what happened to King Edward II in that dark stone prison. Was he the victim of a brutal murder carried out by those who wished to secure their own power? Did he die of natural causes, as the official records suggest? Or was his death part of a grand conspiracy to erase his memory from history? The disappearance of his body and the silence surrounding the events at Berkeley Castle leave us with more questions than answers. Edward's death remains one of the most enduring mysteries in British royal history, and as we look back at the events that led to his untimely end, we are reminded that some stories are never fully told. The circumstances surrounding Edward II's death remain buried in the fog of time, its true cause slipping further and further away, leaving us to wonder, what secrets still lie hidden within the stone walls of Berkeley Castle, waiting to be uncovered? The year was 1762, and London was a city of contrasts, bustling with intellectuals, artists, and philosophers, yet steeped in the superstition and intrigue of the time. Amidst this vibrant, complex backdrop, a bizarre and unsettling mystery began to unfold on a narrow street in the heart of the city, one that would capture the attention of the public and raise questions that lingered for years. This was the case of the Shrieking Woman of Cock Lane, a haunting tale that would come to symbolize both the era's fascination with the supernatural and its struggle with rationalism in the face of inexplicable events. Cock Lane, a narrow, quiet street tucked behind the busy thoroughfares of Cheapside, was hardly a place one would expect to witness an event that would become the talk of the town. The houses lining this street were modest, ordinary, and largely unremarkable. Yet, in the winter of 1762, a strange noise began emanating from one particular house on Cock Lane, sparking a chain of events that would defy rational explanation. It all began with a woman named Elizabeth Parsons and her daughter, who had recently moved into a small house in the area. According to the accounts, the haunting began with a series of unsettling noises, a shrieking sound, described by some as a dreadful and blood-curdling scream. The noises were heard in the dead of night, echoing through the walls of the house, waking neighbors in their beds. The sound was unmistakable, but no clear source could be found. Soon, Elizabeth, who was living in the house with her daughter and her servant, began to claim that the shrieks were not simply random noises, but were somehow linked to her deceased husband, who had died under mysterious circumstances several years earlier. Elizabeth, it seemed, was convinced that the spirit of her husband had returned to her home, and that the shrieking noise was his way of communicating from beyond the grave. At first, the neighbors were skeptical. The sound of a shrieking woman could have been attributed to any number of things: a cat, a strange gust of wind, or even the creaking of old, rotting wood in the house. However, as the strange events persisted, the story began to spread, and more people started to investigate. Eventually, the haunting attracted the attention of a group of well-known figures in the city, including the famous author and social critic Samuel Johnson. as well as a number of other prominent members of London's intellectual and religious communities. Together, they began to piece together the puzzle, trying to determine whether the Shrieking Woman was a true supernatural event, or something far more sinister. As the investigation continued, the case grew even stranger. A new twist emerged when it was discovered that the shrieking sounds were not originating from the walls or the attic, as initially assumed, but from a small area under the floorboards. This discovery led to further suspicion, and many began to wonder if the woman's daughter, or even the servant, might be somehow involved in producing the sound. The idea that a human voice, hidden from sight, could be the source of the shrieks began to gain traction, and what had initially been thought of as a haunting quickly became a spectacle. Some observers began to suggest that the shrieks were the result of trickery, while others continued to insist that the house was indeed the site of a genuine haunting. But it was the involvement of one particular individual that would take the case in a new direction entirely. A man named Richard Parsons, Elizabeth's husband, was at the center of the mystery. Richard had died some years earlier, leaving behind a widow and 2 children. The circumstances of his death, which were initially thought to be the result of a natural illness, came into question as the investigation into the shrieking noise deepened. Could Richard Parsons' death have been the catalyst for the haunting, and were his final words somehow connected to the strange events that had begun to unfold? The investigation took a dark turn when Elizabeth's daughter, who had been the first to claim to have heard the mysterious shrieks, made a startling revelation. She had witnessed something in the house, something that seemed to indicate the presence of an unknown force. Elizabeth's daughter claimed to have seen a figure in the house that resembled her deceased father, further complicating the situation. Was this a manifestation of her grief? Or was it evidence of something more sinister? This only fueled the mystery, and the more the case was examined, the more bizarre the details seemed to become. But it was not until the involvement of the famous skeptic and investigator William Godfrey that a more plausible theory began to emerge. Godfrey, having been called upon to investigate the case by those with doubts about the supernatural explanation, made a breakthrough. After conducting a thorough search of the house, he discovered that the shrieking noise was, in fact, being caused by the young servant girl, who was manipulating the noise by producing a sound that mimicked a shriek. The girl had been using a device to create the eerie noise, and the entire situation had been orchestrated for reasons unknown. The revelation of the hoax caused an uproar, and the case of the Shrieking Woman of Cock Lane came to a swift and scandalous end. The girl was eventually caught and revealed to have been acting under the influence of Elizabeth Parsons, who had seemingly used the haunting as a way to garner attention and possibly manipulate those around her. The strange case had captivated the public for months, but it turned out to be nothing more than a carefully executed deception. Yet, even with the conclusion of the case, many questions remained. Why had Elizabeth Parsons gone to such lengths to create the illusion of a haunting? Was it simply a case of a grieving widow seeking attention or sympathy? Or was there something darker at play? Perhaps a desire for financial gain or revenge against those she blamed for her husband's death? And if the servant girl had been complicit in the ruse, what motivated her to participate in such a bizarre and unsettling charade? Despite the exposure of the hoax, some aspects of the case remained shrouded in mystery. Many of those who had been involved in the investigation, including well-known intellectuals and religious figures, were left to grapple with the implications of the event. Had they been fooled by a clever hoax, or had they simply been swept up in a mass hysteria? The line between skepticism and belief in the supernatural was blurred, and the case raised unsettling questions about the nature of deception, grief, and the limits of human perception. The Shrieking Woman of Cock Lane remains one of the most bizarre and unsettling mysteries of 18th century London. A strange case that blurred the boundaries between the real and the imagined, the psychological and the supernatural. Even today, it serves as a reminder of how easily the human mind can be influenced by fear, grief, and the allure of the unknown. But as we reflect on the strange events that transpired on Cock Lane, we are left to ask, what really happened behind those walls, and what secrets remain hidden beneath the layers of this haunting tale? In the 1690s, the northern skies of Scandinavia became the stage for a strange and unsettling phenomenon, one that would leave a lasting mark on the annals of mystery and folklore. From the distant forests of Norway to the coastal towns of Denmark, there were whispers of strange ships gliding silently through the clouds, phantom airships, said to be the size of large buildings, floating with no visible means of propulsion. These mysterious sightings would spark widespread panic and confusion among the people of Scandinavia, and the event would be known as the Phantom Airship Panic. What began as isolated reports soon became a collective hysteria, with people across the region claiming to have seen these bizarre airborne vessels. Imagine the scene. The sharp, cold air of Scandinavia, crisp with the bite of winter, swept over the vast wilderness and small coastal villages. The dark pine forests, stretching endlessly into the horizon, created a hauntingly quiet backdrop as the people went about their daily lives. In such a remote and isolated world, the sky held a sense of vastness, an unreachable expanse that was both a place of mystery and awe. It was within this setting that something inexplicable began to unfold, a strange, otherworldly sight, casting doubt upon the very nature of the skies themselves. The earliest reports from the 1690s came from Denmark and southern Sweden, where people began to speak of massive, flying ships, structures that seemed to hover in the sky like ghosts, their outlines vague and shifting. Witnesses described seeing dark, large objects moving across the heavens with a slow, deliberate motion, often with no discernible wings or sails, and sometimes with strange lights emanating from them. These ships would appear without warning, often drifting silently above the landscape for hours before vanishing just as mysteriously as they had appeared. In some accounts, these airships were said to have been shaped like a long barrel or resembled floating houses with vast, unexplainable silhouettes. The details varied, but the consistent theme across all reports was the overwhelming sense of otherworldliness and fear. People described hearing strange sounds emanating from the ships, low, resonating hums, like the sound of thunder far off in the distance. The air was said to grow unnaturally still when the ships appeared, adding to the unease. Despite the lack of technological development in the late 17th century, when the idea of powered flight was still centuries away, these reports continued to surface, growing in frequency and intensity. Some claimed that the ships were visited by strange figures, often described as beings of human-like appearance, but whose features were unclear. These figures, it was said, would sometimes communicate with the people below, though no one ever remembered exactly what was said. What was most disturbing, however, was that the sightings never appeared to have any clear pattern. They were random, unpredictable, and sometimes seemed to occur during times of great political or social tension. One of the more compelling reports came from the town of Gothenburg in 1697, where a large crowd gathered after the appearance of what some described as a floating fortress. The witnesses claimed to have seen the enormous ship hover motionless above them for several hours, its shadow casting an eerie pall over the town. Strangely, many of the townsfolk later reported experiencing vivid dreams and feelings of unease, as though something profound had happened, though they couldn't explain what. For weeks afterward, the townspeople discussed their encounters in hushed tones, some swearing that they had seen the same ship, while others insisted the objects were omens, portents of something terrible about to unfold. As the sightings became more widespread, the panic escalated. Skeptics insisted the sightings were nothing more than mass hysteria, fueled by superstition, fear, and the general unease that plagued Scandinavia at the time. The region had been suffering from a long period of hardship. Plagues, famine, and the aftermath of war were weighing heavily on the minds of the people. The sun itself, it seemed, was barely visible during the long winter months, and the long hours of darkness could have played tricks on the mind. In a time when the understanding of the natural world was still in its infancy, such strange phenomena could easily be attributed to divine or supernatural forces, and the people may have simply been looking for explanations in a world that seemed out of their control. However, the increasing frequency and consistency of the reports continued to defy explanation. Eyewitnesses who didn't know each other, some from distant villages, gave strikingly similar descriptions of the phantom ships. These reports weren't isolated to one small area. They stretched across regions, from Denmark to Sweden to Norway. What's more, the sightings often appeared in clusters, with multiple people reporting the same event at the same time. One popular theory was that the sightings were the result of a natural atmospheric phenomenon, such as the reflection of light off the surface of clouds, or the optical illusion caused by the aurora borealis. Some argued that what people were seeing were simply reflections of ships on the horizon, distorted by the atmosphere in such a way that they appeared to be flying or floating. But this theory did little to explain the consistency of the reports, or the fact that many of the witnesses described the ships as much larger and more intricate than any known craft of the time. Another explanation, rooted in the beliefs of the time, suggested that these mysterious ships were manifestations of a divine or demonic nature, possibly linked to the unsettled political climate in Scandinavia. The late 17th century had been a period of turmoil, famine, disease, and the aftermath of the Great Northern War. Could these strange occurrences be the result of mass hysteria, perhaps exacerbated by the fear of supernatural retribution? Many people at the time believed that celestial phenomena were a sign of impending disaster, a warning from the heavens that could not be ignored. And then there were those who speculated that the phantom airships might not have been of this world at all. Could they have been a visitation from another place? An early encounter with extraterrestrial beings long before the modern concept of UFOs emerged? Though such an explanation might seem far-fetched today, it is important to note that the idea of beings from the sky was not foreign to 17th century imagination. In fact, celestial phenomena and otherworldly visitors were common themes in the literature and religious thought of the time. With each new sighting and each new report, the mystery deepened. The townsfolk, gripped by fear and uncertainty, were left to wonder. Were these strange ships omens of disaster or something far more inexplicable? And if they were real, what were their purpose? Could they have been visitors from another time, another world, or simply the product of a collective imagination in a time of crisis? As the sightings eventually faded into the annals of history, the phantom airship panic of the 1690s left behind more questions than answers. Were these truly visions of the supernatural, or was there a rational explanation that has simply been lost to time? Could they have been part of a shared hallucination, a mass delusion brought on by the stress of war and hardship? Or were they, as some believed, an encounter with forces beyond human understanding? The story of the phantom airships remains one of the most bizarre and unsettling mysteries in Scandinavian history. As with many great mysteries, it continues to elude a definitive explanation. In the quiet, darkened skies of Northern Europe, the question still lingers. What truly was seen over the vast expanses of Scandinavia in the 1690s, and what remains hidden in the shadows of that strange, unexplained phenomenon? The year was 1385. and the Iberian Peninsula was a battleground for power and pride. In the small kingdom of Portugal, a monumental clash was taking shape, one that would forever alter the course of the nation's history. The Battle of Aljubarrota, fought on August 14th of that year, was a decisive confrontation between the forces of King João I of Portugal and the invading army of the Kingdom of Castile. Against all odds, the Portuguese army, vastly outnumbered, achieved a resounding victory. The Castilian forces were crushed, and the future of Portugal as an independent kingdom was secured. But in the aftermath of the battle, something strange began to surface. Accounts from the time speak of the missing knights, members of the Portuguese military nobility who fought bravely on that fateful day but seemingly disappeared without a trace. These knights, once a key part of the victorious Portuguese forces, vanished after the battle, and their fate remains one of history's most perplexing mysteries. The Battle of Aljubarrota itself was a pivotal moment in the history of medieval Portugal. João I, who had ascended to the throne only 4 years earlier, found himself in a battle for both survival and legitimacy. His claim to the throne was contested by the powerful Castilian monarch, King Juan I, who sought to annex Portugal and bring it under Castilian rule. At the heart of the conflict lay not just the territorial integrity of Portugal, but also the future of its royal lineage. In this moment of crisis, the Portuguese forces, led by João I, stood defiant against the overwhelming might of Castile. The battle was fought on the fields near the village of Aljubarrota, a location chosen by the Portuguese for its strategic advantages. The Castilian forces, numbering around 30,000, were heavily outnumbered by the Portuguese, who had around 7,000 soldiers. However, despite the numerical disparity, the Portuguese army had a distinct advantage. They were fighting on their own soil, and the knowledge of the terrain gave them an upper hand. The terrain itself, marked by rolling hills and thick vegetation, provided the perfect setting for a well-organized defensive strategy. Under the command of the legendary Portuguese general Nuno Álvares Pereira, the Portuguese forces employed a series of innovative tactics. They utilized well-placed archers and cavalry to break up the Castilian formations, inflicting devastating losses. The result was a decisive Portuguese victory, which saw the death of the Castilian commander and the disbandment of his forces. It was a moment of unparalleled triumph for Portugal, a victory that preserved its independence and solidified the legitimacy of João I's rule. Yet, in the wake of this great victory, a peculiar and unsettling detail began to surface. While the battle was heralded as a military success, accounts began to emerge of knights, brave soldiers who had fought for Portugal, who disappeared in the confusion. The most disturbing aspect of their disappearance was the complete lack of any clear explanation. No bodies were found, no signs of a struggle. It was as if these knights had vanished into thin air, leaving only their armor and weapons behind, scattered on the battlefield. The earliest records to mention these missing knights come from chroniclers who were eager to document the events of the battle. They wrote of the knights' bravery and valor, their actions on the battlefield, and their role in securing the victory. However, as the battle came to an end, these same chroniclers began to mention the strange absence of these men. Some reports suggested that the knights had simply fled the battlefield in the heat of the conflict, driven by fear or desperation. But this explanation seemed out of place. These were experienced, trained warriors, men who had fought in many battles before. Why would they suddenly desert their comrades when victory was so close? Other theories suggested that the knights had been captured by the Castilians, though there was little evidence to support this claim. If they had been taken prisoner, why were they not paraded or executed by the victorious Castilian forces? No such reports exist, and the silence surrounding their fate only deepened the mystery. Some speculated that the knights had somehow fallen victim to an ambush or were lost in the chaos of the retreating Castilian forces. Yet, the terrain was not particularly conducive to such an event, and no substantial clues were ever found to back up this hypothesis. As time went on, the mystery of the missing knights grew even more perplexing. There were whispers among the Portuguese people of a more sinister explanation. Some claimed that the knights had been betrayed by their own comrades, perhaps by rival factions within the Portuguese army, seeking to gain favor with the king. Others suggested that the knights had somehow met a supernatural fate, their disappearances the result of some dark force beyond human understanding. The Portuguese were known for their deep religious convictions, and during this period, beliefs in divine intervention or supernatural occurrences were not uncommon. Could it be that the knights had been taken by some unseen force, or that they had been punished for some transgression that only they understood? Theories surrounding their disappearance began to spread like wildfire, from the plausible to the outlandish. Some suggested that the knights had somehow been swept away by a sudden flood or storm, though there was no record of such an event occurring on the day of the battle. Others speculated that the knights had been led into some sort of secret mission, entrusted with a task of great importance that had never been revealed to the public. This theory was particularly intriguing, given the ongoing tensions between Portugal and Castile, and the possibility that certain individuals might have been tasked with high-stakes espionage or covert operations following the battle. As the years passed, the mystery deepened. No new information surfaced, and the missing knights became a footnote in the grander narrative of Portugal's victory at Aljubarrota. Yet, the questions surrounding their disappearance continued to haunt the historical record. Were they simply lost in the fog of war, their fates never to be known? Or was there something more to their vanishing, something hidden in the shadows of history? The disappearance of the Knights of Aljubarrota remains an unsolved enigma, a haunting riddle that time has yet to answer. Despite the best efforts of historians and scholars, no definitive explanation has ever emerged. Theories abound, but they are often speculative and without concrete evidence. The fate of these brave soldiers, who helped secure one of Portugal's greatest victories, has remained a puzzle for centuries, and their disappearance continues to evoke both fascination and unease. Were the Knights of Aljubarrota simply lost to the chaos of battle? Or is there something more to their disappearance? Some dark, hidden truth that still waits to be uncovered? As we delve deeper into the mystery, we are left to wonder, what really happened to those men, and why have they remained lost to history? The answers, it seems, may remain forever elusive, buried in the sands of time. It was the spring of 1561 in Nuremberg, a thriving city in the Holy Roman Empire, known for its trade, its skilled craftsmen, and its imposing fortress walls. On the morning of April 14th, a strange event occurred in the sky above that would not only leave the city's inhabitants terrified, but would become one of the most perplexing and eerie episodes in the history of aerial phenomena. The people of Nuremberg, going about their daily routines, witnessed something that defied all explanation, a vision in the sky that seemed almost like a harbinger of doom. What began as a normal day soon became something entirely out of the ordinary. Witnesses described a battle taking place among the clouds. No, not between soldiers, but between strange, otherworldly objects, fireballs, as they would come to be known. These fireballs, or Himmelsgefecht in the German chronicles, were not mere flashes of light or atmospheric anomalies. According to the reports, they were massive, cylindrical objects, some of them resembling enormous spheres or globes, glowing with fiery intensity, and they moved across the sky as though engaged in some kind of celestial conflict. The people of Nuremberg watched in awe and terror as the sky seemed to erupt with strange lights and shadows. Some accounts speak of objects that darted and zoomed with incredible speed, while others describe a formation of crosses or swords made of light, battling one another in a dance of intense, fiery explosions. These objects, which moved in patterns that no known craft of the time could replicate, appeared to clash, causing great bursts of fire and light. This aerial display went on for hours, as if the very sky above had become a battlefield. The most vivid and haunting account comes from the Nuremberg Chronicle, written by the local historian Hans Glaser, who was a first-hand witness to the event. His woodcut engraving of the event is one of the most iconic images associated with the fireballs of Nuremberg. It shows the fiery objects in the sky, as well as the terrified townspeople below, all frozen in a moment of disbelief. The scene depicted in the engraving is both haunting and surreal. People are seen pointing at the sky, their faces filled with wonder, fear, and confusion. Above them, enormous spheres and cross-like shapes are embroiled in a fiery celestial struggle. The details in Glaser's report are striking in their specificity. He describes how the fireballs were not only visible from Nuremberg, but were seen over a wide area, spanning miles of the surrounding countryside. The sky, according to some accounts, was lit up as if by a great conflagration, with streaks of light burning through the clouds. Yet, in the aftermath, there was no physical evidence of such a battle in the sky. No scorch marks, no physical remnants of the fireballs that had lit up the heavens. The people of Nuremberg were left to ponder. What had they just witnessed? Was it a divine omen, a natural occurrence, or something else entirely? As the years passed, the mysterious event of the fireballs was often discussed but was rarely explained. Some historians and scientists of the time suggested that the phenomenon could have been a series of meteorological occurrences, perhaps the result of strange atmospheric conditions or a rare optical illusion. After all, meteor showers and unusual cloud formations were not unknown to medieval Europe. But this explanation did little to account for the peculiar nature of the fireballs themselves, their size, the way they moved, and the vivid description of the battle they seemed to engage in. Could such a seemingly coordinated and dramatic aerial event simply be the result of a natural occurrence? Others were quick to point to more supernatural explanations. In an age when the line between the divine and the natural world was often blurred, many believed that what they had witnessed was a sign from God, a divine warning or judgment upon the people of Nuremberg. The heavens, it seemed, had opened up to deliver some unknown message. In the religious context of the time, signs and omens were not uncommon, especially when political or social unrest threatened the stability of society. Could the fireballs be a divine message in the sky? A reflection of the chaos that would soon sweep through Europe in the years that followed? Yet, it was not just theologians and religious scholars who were intrigued by the strange event. As the centuries passed, the phenomenon would become a point of fascination for those who sought to explain it through the lens of more modern, speculative theories. Theories began to emerge that tied the event to extraterrestrial involvement, suggesting that the fireballs were some form of alien spacecraft, engaged in a battle or maneuvering in the skies above Nuremberg. Such ideas, though seemingly fantastical at first glance, would resonate with later generations, especially as modern UFO sightings became more prevalent. Could the fireballs be an early example of an extraterrestrial encounter, long before humanity had the concept of flying saucers or alien visitors? Some researchers even began to propose that the strange aerial battle was linked to an advanced, unknown technology, a technology far beyond what was available to humanity in the 16th century. Could the fireballs have been man-made, the result of some secret or experimental weaponry? There were, of course, no reports of such technology existing at the time, and no evidence has ever been found to support this theory. Still, the idea of a secret weapon or an advanced civilization leaving a mark on the skies above Nuremberg is a provocative one. Yet, the most intriguing aspect of the fireballs is the fact that, despite the detailed accounts of the event, there was no definitive explanation for what had occurred. No matter how many theories were put forward, whether natural, divine, or extraterrestrial, each was met with skepticism or inconclusive evidence. And this leaves us with the lingering question, what truly was witnessed that day in the skies over Nuremberg? In the centuries since, the fireballs of Nuremberg have continued to fascinate and unsettle those who hear the tale. The engraving by Hans Glaser, with its haunting depiction of the strange celestial battle, remains one of the most iconic images of the event. But despite the various attempts to explain the phenomenon, the true nature of the fireballs remains an unsolved enigma. As we look up at the night sky today, we are reminded of the mysteries that still exist, mysteries that persist in defying explanation. Whether it was a rare meteorological event, a divine message, an extraterrestrial encounter, or something else entirely, the fireballs of Nuremberg are a reminder that not all mysteries have easy answers. Perhaps, as with so many other unexplained phenomena, we are left to wonder, what, if anything, still lies hidden in the skies above us, waiting to be understood? And what secrets of the past might still be waiting to be uncovered just beyond the reach of our current understanding? As the summer sun sank lower in the sky on the morning of July 27, 1566, the citizens of Basel, a bustling city located along the banks of the Rhine River in what is now Switzerland, went about their daily routines. Little did they know that, for the next several hours, their world would be transformed into something entirely otherworldly. In the skies above them, a celestial phenomenon unlike anything they had ever witnessed began to unfold. It was an event that would soon be recorded in the annals of history, but its true nature remains a subject of intrigue and speculation to this day: the Basel celestial phenomenon. For the people of Basel, the event began as an ordinary day, though the air was thick with tension, as Europe at the time was caught in the throes of religious and political upheaval. The Reformation had already taken root, and the continent was a tinderbox of conflict and change. Yet, despite the turbulence below, the sky above promised to be a more mysterious and unsettling force, one that would make the turmoil of earthly matters seem insignificant by comparison. As the day wore on, something extraordinary happened. The sky above Basel filled with strange, swirling shapes, dark, ominous spheres, crosses, and rods of light, which seemed to collide with one another in a violent dance. Witnesses who were in the streets described seeing these mysterious shapes as they moved across the heavens. According to local chronicles, the objects in the sky appeared to be involved in some kind of aerial conflict, an almost violent confrontation that mirrored the chaos of the world below. It wasn't long before the celestial battle escalated in the eyes of the people. The shapes, many described as glowing or fiery, seemed to be engaged in a form of aerial warfare. Some witnesses claimed that the sky was filled with hundreds of these strange objects, which darted through the air in seemingly erratic patterns, crossing and intersecting one another as if in combat. The chaos of this battle was intense, with flashes of light and bright sparks reported as the spheres collided and separated. Onlookers watched, transfixed and filled with terror, as the sky seemed to come alive with these eerie, almost supernatural forces. The most vivid accounts of this event come from a pamphlet published shortly afterward, written by a local printer, which described the phenomenon in great detail. The pamphlet, titled "The Celestial Phenomenon in Basel," was one of the earliest recorded attempts to capture the event for posterity. In it, the author described how great black and red balls moved across the sky, attacking one another with great speed, followed by the appearance of crosses and long rods. These shapes were said to move with incredible speed, crashing into one another, seemingly locked in a cosmic struggle. At one point, it was reported that the sky itself appeared to be on fire, with explosions of light scattering across the horizon. The pamphlet went on to describe the impact of the event on the citizens of Basel. As these fiery shapes clashed in the heavens, the people below were gripped by a sense of dread. The appearance of the celestial battle was widely interpreted as an omen, an apocalyptic sign from the heavens. In a time when religious fervor ran high and the fear of divine retribution was omnipresent, the people of Basel could not help but see the celestial display as a warning. Some believed that the conflict above them was a manifestation of God's anger, a reflection of the social and religious upheaval sweeping across Europe. Others saw it as a sign of the coming end of the world. Given the pervasive atmosphere of war, famine, and disease, many felt that the celestial conflict was a reflection of the human strife below. But if the pamphlet's description of the event is to be believed, the phenomenon did not end with a simple clash of lights and shapes. Reports from the time suggest that the celestial shapes did not simply disappear as quickly as they had appeared. Instead, there were continued sightings of strange lights in the sky for several weeks after the initial event. These lights, according to some accounts, continued to dance across the heavens in unusual patterns, never fully resolving into a recognizable shape or form. The strange phenomenon seemed to persist, almost as though the skies themselves were unsettled. Historians and scientists have long been fascinated by the Basel celestial phenomenon, and numerous theories have been proposed to explain it. The most straightforward explanation lies in the realm of atmospheric and meteorological phenomena. Some suggest that what the people of Basel saw could have been a rare type of weather event, such as a combination of halos, sundogs, or lenticular clouds, which are known to produce unusual visual effects in the sky. These optical phenomena can sometimes cause objects like the sun or the moon to appear to have strange halos, or can create the illusion of objects floating in the sky. While this theory could account for the appearance of light in the sky, it does little to explain the battle or the apparent aggression that was described in the reports. Another explanation involves the phenomenon known as ball lightning, which has been recorded in various parts of the world over the centuries. Ball lightning is a rare and poorly understood electrical phenomenon in which glowing orbs of light appear to float through the air. These orbs are often described as moving erratically and can sometimes explode or cause fires. Could it be that the people of Basel were simply witnessing a rare occurrence of ball lightning, compounded by their superstitions and the tense atmosphere of the time? Yet, the sheer number of objects described and their apparent behavior still makes this theory difficult to fully accept. Still, the most intriguing theory is one that pushes the boundaries of speculation. Could it be that what the people of Basel witnessed was not of this world? Could the strange shapes and lights in the sky have been some form of advanced technology, an early instance of a UFO encounter, long before the modern understanding of extraterrestrial life? While this theory may sound far-fetched, it must be noted that the idea of celestial visitors or divine omens was not foreign to the people of 16th century Europe. Throughout history, numerous cultures have reported encounters with strange lights in the sky, and in an age before the advent of modern technology, such events were often seen as supernatural or divine. As the centuries have passed, the Basel celestial phenomenon has been reduced to little more than a footnote in the vast history of strange occurrences. Yet, it remains one of the most compelling and mysterious events in the historical record. The descriptions of the fiery spheres and the chaotic aerial battle continue to stir the imagination, prompting both curiosity and skepticism in equal measure. The pamphlet's vivid portrayal of the event captures a moment of collective fear, wonder, and confusion, feelings that are just as relevant today as they were in the 16th century. Despite all the theories and attempts at explanation, the true nature of the Basel celestial phenomenon remains elusive. Was it a natural occurrence, a divine sign, or something far more inexplicable? The unanswered questions linger in the air, much like the lights that once filled the skies above Basel. As we look to the heavens, we are reminded that there are still mysteries waiting to be uncovered, and perhaps some answers that remain just beyond our reach. Could it be that the skies above us still hold secrets, waiting to be revealed, as they did over 450 years ago? It was a crisp, quiet morning in the village of Cumnor, near Oxford, when the body of Amy Robsart was discovered at the foot of a staircase in her home. She was just 28 years old, the wife of Robert Dudley, one of the most powerful men in England. His name was whispered in the halls of power, and his ambition had earned him both favor and enemies at the court of Queen Elizabeth I. The death of Amy Robsart, however, would soon overshadow all his political ambitions, casting a dark shadow over his life and leaving behind a mystery that has yet to be fully explained. Amy's home, Cumnor Place, was a stately residence located on the outskirts of Oxford. It was a beautiful house, surrounded by peaceful, sprawling gardens that hid the drama that was unfolding within. On the morning of September 8, 1560, Amy was found lifeless, her body sprawled beneath a staircase, her neck broken. The most likely explanation, according to the local authorities, was that she had fallen from the top of the stairs. But was it a tragic accident, or was something more sinister at play? The events leading up to Amy's death were far from ordinary. Robert Dudley, her husband, had been away in London at the time. Amy, a woman of grace and beauty, was in a precarious position, both socially and politically. Her marriage to Dudley had drawn the attention of the court, particularly Queen Elizabeth, who seemed to view Dudley with both affection and suspicion. Amy, it seemed, was not just a wife, but a pawn in a much larger political game. Her marriage to Dudley had been arranged, and while their relationship had reportedly been loving, the world they inhabited was rife with intrigue, jealousy, and ambition. It was said that Dudley's eye was often drawn to other women, and rumors of his infidelity were common. Amy's own position at court was not without its challenges. She was a woman of noble birth, but her status was often overshadowed by the ambitions of her husband. Her life, it seemed, was under constant scrutiny, both for her connection to Dudley and for her growing isolation. Many historians have pointed out that she had been suffering from ill health in the months before her death and had become increasingly withdrawn. It was said that she suffered from depression and perhaps even anxiety, conditions that would have been difficult to treat in the 16th century. The discovery of Amy Robsart's body was met with immediate suspicion. The authorities quickly concluded that her death was accidental, a simple fall. But doubts remained. How could a woman of her stature, who had been in such poor health, have fallen from such a height, and so suddenly? Was the fall truly an accident, or was it something far darker? The official explanation, that Amy had fallen, was bolstered by the testimony of a servant who had claimed to have seen her at the top of the stairs moments before the fall. Yet, despite this testimony, the circumstances surrounding Amy's death were far from straightforward. The position of her body, the lack of any sign of a struggle, and the manner of her death led many to question the conclusions of the authorities. Was it possible that Amy had been pushed, or worse, that she had been murdered? One of the most compelling aspects of this mystery lies in the timing of Amy's death. Robert Dudley, at the time, was rumored to be one of Queen Elizabeth's suitors. Their relationship, though never formalized, was the subject of court gossip and speculation. Dudley had been one of Elizabeth's closest advisors, and the idea of him ascending to a position of even greater power, possibly even marriage to the Queen herself, was a tantalizing prospect. But Amy's death could have threatened all of that. If Dudley were married to a woman who had died under suspicious circumstances, it would tarnish his reputation and make his ambitions much harder to achieve. At the time, There were rumors swirling at court that Dudley may have been involved in his wife's death. Theories suggested that Amy's death was not accidental, but a carefully orchestrated murder meant to remove a potential obstacle from Dudley's path to the Queen's favor. Was it possible that Dudley, eager to advance his political standing, had arranged for his wife's death in order to clear the way for a more advantageous marriage? Or was this just a product of the political intrigue that surrounded the court? As the days passed, suspicions mounted. Amy's death was whispered about in the courts of Europe, and the incident would leave a permanent stain on Robert Dudley's career. Though he was never formally accused of any wrongdoing, the shadow of suspicion lingered over him, and his reputation was irrevocably damaged. Dudley would go on to hold significant power, but his rise to favor with the Queen was never as certain as it had been before Amy's death. But despite the suspicion that clouded Dudley's involvement in his wife's death, there were other theories, and some historians believe that Amy's death may have been a result of her own personal struggles. Could it have been suicide? Amy had been in poor health for some time, and it is believed that her mental health had deteriorated in the months leading up to her death. Was her fall from the stairs a tragic act of despair, a final escape from the pressures of her life, both at court and at home? Others have speculated that the fall may have been the result of an accident, perhaps linked to her fragile state. Could Amy have lost her footing while climbing the stairs, or could her health have played a role in her sudden collapse? Given the lack of a clear motive for murder and the absence of any conclusive evidence to suggest foul play, some have argued that her death might have simply been an unfortunate accident, exacerbated by her ill health. But as time has passed, the mystery surrounding Amy Robsart's death has only deepened. The true cause of her death remains unclear, and the unanswered questions continue to haunt both historians and those fascinated by the intrigue of the Tudor court. Was it murder, or was it something else entirely? Was her death a tragic consequence of her own mental state, or was it part of a larger, more sinister political game? Perhaps the most unsettling aspect of this mystery is that it is unlikely we will ever know the truth. The records from the time are vague and contradictory, and the people involved have long since passed into history. Yet the questions remain, as unresolved as ever. Who truly caused Amy Robsart's death? And why, more than 450 years later, does this tragic event still resonate, still stir the imagination, and still evoke a sense of dark uncertainty? Amy Robsart's death, like so many historical mysteries, is a haunting reminder that not all answers lie in the records of history. Some truths may always remain out of reach, shrouded in secrecy and lost to time. The unanswered questions about her fate, the uncertainty surrounding her death, continue to stir the imagination, leaving us to wonder whether we will ever uncover the full story of what happened in Cumnor Place on that fateful September day. It was the winter of 1770s London, a city known for its bustling streets, the thrum of commerce, and the persistent fog that rolled in from the River Thames. Amid the wealth and grandeur of the Georgian era, a strange event began to unfold. An event that would leave its mark on the public psyche for years to come, a haunting episode that still eludes full explanation. This was not a story of political intrigue or royal scandal, but rather something far more eerie, the strange case of the London ghost chair panic. The origins of the mystery lie in a curious incident that occurred in the heart of London. In the early days of the 18th century, a series of inexplicable occurrences were reported in the homes of several well-to-do families. The incident centered around a chair. To be more specific, a single chair that, according to reports, was not only seen to move on its own, but was also said to have the power to frighten, even terrify, those who came into contact with it. The first documented case occurred in a wealthy townhouse on the fringes of Covent Garden, a district famous for its theaters and vibrant atmosphere. A young woman, a maid working in the house, had been the first to report strange occurrences involving a solitary chair in the drawing room. It was an old, creaky piece of furniture, a wooden chair with a high back and faded upholstery. At first, the events were subtle. The chair would shift slightly during the night, as if someone had just sat in it. But then, the movements grew more pronounced. The maid, who had been tasked with cleaning the room each morning, described how the chair would often be found in an entirely different position, far from where it had originally been placed. Sometimes it would be positioned with its back to the fireplace. Other times it would be facing the door, as though someone had been sitting there, staring into the room. It was as if the chair had a will of its own, a will that defied all logic. The maid, already on edge from the eerie nature of the changes, began to grow fearful of the chair's presence. Her growing anxiety was not helped by the other strange phenomenon that seemed to accompany it. Inexplicable drafts in the room, doors opening and closing without explanation, and the distinct sensation of being watched, even when the room appeared to be empty. Word of the strange happenings spread quickly through the household. At first, it was dismissed as an elaborate prank, or perhaps the product of a vivid imagination. But soon, others in the household began to experience the same unnerving phenomenon. The lady of the house, who had been skeptical at first, came into the room one evening to find the chair positioned at the far end of the room, facing the opposite wall, as though awaiting her arrival. The sight of the chair, so steadfast and unmoving, yet clearly out of place, caused her heart to race. The air in the room grew cold, and she was struck with a sudden, oppressive feeling of dread. Something was not right. The chair, in that moment, seemed to transcend its mere function as a piece of furniture and took on a more sinister presence. After that evening, the phenomenon escalated. The chair began to move more violently, sometimes slamming against the walls, sometimes spinning as if it were caught in an invisible whirlwind. A few nights later, a guest, a renowned local philosopher, was invited to the house. As he sat in the very chair that had caused so much alarm, he reported feeling a chill creeping up his spine. He described the sensation of being unable to leave, as if the chair held him captive. When he eventually rose to leave, it was said that the chair followed him, sliding across the floor with an eerie swiftness. The guests, shocked and unnerved, quickly made their excuses, but the feeling of unease lingered long after they had departed. Soon, more houses in London began to report similar incidents. The cases spread, and over the course of several months, at least a dozen families claimed to have witnessed the phenomenon. This was not an isolated event, but rather a haunting trend that seemed to be taking hold of the city. It wasn't just in the wealthy estates either. Even commoners in humble households began to report seeing chairs move of their own accord. What had begun as a solitary oddity was now a city-wide panic. The cause of this haunting was never discovered, though theories began to emerge, each more bizarre than the last. One theory suggested that the chairs were somehow imbued with the restless spirits of their previous owners, souls that had been trapped in the material world. The belief in ghosts and spirits was widespread during this time, and it was not uncommon for people to associate unexplained phenomena with supernatural forces. Could it be that these chairs, perhaps relics from an earlier time, were cursed? Were they possessed by an unseen force, perhaps even a malevolent one? Another, more scientific explanation posited that the strange movements were the result of natural causes, such as shifts in the foundation of the houses themselves. The unstable, shifting ground of London, particularly in areas prone to flooding, could cause vibrations in the floor, leading the chairs to move. But this theory, while plausible, didn't account for the reported feeling of unease that accompanied the events. Nor did it explain the peculiar sensation of the chairs following those who sat in them. The phenomenon seemed to transcend the physical laws of nature. A more speculative theory emerged suggesting that the ghost chairs were somehow connected to psychological phenomena, a collective mass hysteria. London, after all, was a city in the midst of great upheaval during this period. The Industrial Revolution was beginning to take shape, and the social and economic dynamics of the city were in flux. The stresses of this changing world may have driven people to imagine or exaggerate supernatural events. In this context, the moving chairs could be seen as a reflection of the anxiety and instability of the time, a manifestation of a city on the edge of a new, unknown world. The panic surrounding the London ghost chairs reached its peak in 1773, when a public spectacle was organized to investigate the phenomena. A group of self-proclaimed ghost hunters, scientists, and local dignitaries gathered at one of the reported sites of the disturbances. What followed was an event marked by confusion and fear. During the investigation, the chairs indeed began to move. However, whether it was a result of trickery, the sheer collective anxiety of the crowd, or something far stranger, no one could say for certain. The spectacle only fueled the rumors, and soon the legend of the London ghost chairs was cemented in the city's folklore. The mystery of the London ghost chair panic eventually faded from public view, though it continued to haunt the imagination of those who heard the tale. In the years that followed, the city would see many more supernatural events, but the moving chairs were never fully explained. Was it a case of collective hysteria, a curse, or something more? Could it have been the work of some unseen force, bending reality itself? Or was it merely a trick of the mind, a reflection of the tensions and uncertainties of the age? The London ghost chair. Panic remains, to this day, a tantalizing enigma. No clear answers have ever emerged to explain the strange occurrences. And as with so many of history's most bizarre mysteries, we are left with more questions than answers. Were the chairs truly haunted? Or was it the collective imagination of a city gripped by fear and fascination with the supernatural? And if the answer lies beyond our current understanding, what does that say about the nature of the world we live in and the mysteries that still await discovery? The truth, like the chairs themselves, remains elusive, waiting, just beyond our grasp. At the heart of one of the most enigmatic episodes in French history, there stands a shadowy figure whose identity remains a mystery to this day, a man who spent the last years of his life hidden away behind a heavy iron mask. His death in 1703 only deepened the intrigue surrounding him. The man in the iron mask, as he has come to be known, is a figure shrouded in legend, a man whose story raises more questions than it answers. Who was he, and why was he condemned to such a bizarre fate? The story begins in the most unlikely of places, a dark, damp cell in the Bastille, Paris's infamous fortress prison at the turn of the 18th century. The man in question, who was incarcerated for nearly 34 years, lived out his final days in almost complete isolation, his face concealed behind a mask of iron. The details of his imprisonment are scarce, and the mystery surrounding his identity has sparked theories and speculation for centuries. Who was he? Why the mask? And why the secrecy surrounding his life? It was the death of the masked prisoner in 1703 that reignited the public's fascination with his story. A man who had been kept in the utmost secrecy, away from the prying eyes of both the French court and the public, now seemed to vanish entirely from history. His burial, as was customary for prisoners of such high profile, was quiet and without ceremony. He was laid to rest in a small, unmarked grave, and the question of his identity, like so many others before him, went unanswered. The most detailed accounts of the man in the iron mask come from the writings of his prison guards and the few who interacted with him in the final years of his life. He was a prisoner, they said, like no other. He was said to have been polite, well-spoken, and even refined in his manners, but his face was hidden beneath a mask of such heavy iron that it became an immediate source of fascination. The mask was not a simple piece of metal. It was meticulously crafted, covering not just his face but his entire head, leaving no hint as to his true appearance. The man's prison guards, who were strictly ordered never to remove the mask, were forbidden to speak of his past. He had been locked away for reasons that, even in the most privileged circles of the French court, were considered forbidden knowledge. In fact, the secrecy surrounding the man in the iron mask was so profound that it became a subject of endless speculation. Various theories have emerged over the centuries, each as intriguing and unsettling as the last. Some have posited that the prisoner was a royal relative, perhaps the twin brother of King Louis XIV himself, locked away to prevent a rival claim to the throne. Others have suggested that he was a disgraced noble, punished for an unknown crime that threatened the stability of the French monarchy. Still, others believe he was involved in a political conspiracy that went beyond mere family drama, perhaps an attempt to undermine the very heart of the monarchy. One of the most compelling theories is that the man in the iron mask was indeed the twin brother of Louis XIV, the Sun King. The idea that Louis, in an effort to secure his own position and prevent any threats to his reign, had his brother imprisoned for life, is a story that has captivated historians for centuries. After all, the idea of a hidden twin fits neatly into the court intrigues of the time, where the line between reality and rumor often blurred. If this theory is to be believed, it would suggest a level of cruelty and paranoia rarely seen in monarchies of that era, an attempt to conceal a royal sibling whose existence could have challenged the very legitimacy of the king himself. But the question remains, why the mask? Why not simply allow the man to remain anonymous, as was often the case for prisoners of the time? The notion of a mask, an iron mask no less, suggests a deliberate effort to prevent any recognition of the prisoner's true identity. The mask would have been a constant reminder of his inferiority, of his permanent status as a person who was not to be seen, not to be known. In the deeply hierarchical society of 17th century France, this would have been a deeply humiliating and powerful symbol of control. However, another theory contends that the man in the iron mask was not a royal figure at all, but rather a man whose crime was so great, so profound, that the authorities of the time felt it necessary to erase his identity entirely. Perhaps his crime was political, perhaps a conspiracy that threatened the crown. What is clear, however, is that this prisoner was of high enough rank or importance to merit such an extreme measure of secrecy. Was he involved in an act of betrayal or treason, a plot against the monarchy that threatened to upend the carefully balanced power structure of France? And yet, there are those who argue that the mystery of the man in the iron mask is not one of politics at all, but rather one of intrigue and mystery, woven into the very fabric of history. Some have suggested that his identity was deliberately concealed to protect those around him, that he may have been a member of the royal family or a powerful figure whose very existence, if revealed, could have sparked a civil war. The fact that he remained imprisoned for so long and that his mask was never removed suggests a deeper layer of mystery than mere political scheming. It suggests that his true identity was so potent, so fraught with significance, that even after death, it could not be revealed. The most persistent and unsettling aspect of this story lies in the fact that we may never know the true identity of the man in the iron mask. Despite centuries of speculation, no documents have surfaced to reveal his name. No records have been found to explain the true nature of his imprisonment, and no new evidence has emerged to shed light on the enigma. His story is not one of simple historical curiosity. It is a riddle, a puzzle that remains incomplete, a void in the records of the time that seems deliberately created. Even the events surrounding his death are shrouded in ambiguity. It is said that he died quietly in his cell, but the circumstances of his passing remain as mysterious as the man himself. The man in the iron mask exists as a symbol of secrets, of power and fear, and of the ways in which history can leave behind impenetrable gaps. His story raises questions that cannot be answered by mere historical fact alone. Was he a royal prisoner, a member of the French court who posed a threat to the monarchy? Or was he a pawn in a much larger political game, one whose identity would never be known? Was he a victim of an unforgiving system, or was he complicit in the very conspiracies that led to his imprisonment? More than 300 years after his death, the mystery of the man in the iron mask endures. His name remains unknown, his life remains a shadow, and his story continues to captivate the minds of those who seek to uncover the truth. In a world where history is often written in the open, this remains one of its darkest, most impenetrable corners, an unanswered question that may never find resolution. The man in the iron mask is a reminder of how history can conceal as much as it reveals. In his case, the truth may never come to light, but the mystery persists, haunting us with the possibility that some secrets, no matter how tantalizing, are fated to remain hidden. Who was he? And what might his silence reveal about the powerful forces of secrecy that shaped the world in which he lived? The answers, it seems, will remain forever locked away. In the quiet rural town of Tedworth, nestled in the countryside of Wiltshire, England, there is a story that has haunted its history for over 350 years. The events that transpired in 1661 are shrouded in mystery, and even today, the legacy of the phantom drummer of Tedworth remains one of the most bizarre and unsettling episodes in English folklore. This is a tale that straddles the line between reality and the supernatural, one that still raises more questions than answers, and continues to captivate the imagination of those who come across it. Tedworth itself is a charming town, characterized by its cobbled streets and small historic houses, a place where time seems to slow down. But in the 17th century, this peaceful setting was anything but calm. In the midst of the English Civil War, the village was embroiled in conflict and unrest. It was a time when fear and superstition ran rampant, and the boundaries between the known world and the unknown were often blurred. In such a climate, strange occurrences, unexplained noises, ghostly apparitions, and eerie events were not uncommon. Yet nothing prepared the people of Tedworth for what was about to unfold. The incident began in 1661 at the house of a man named Richard Mompesson. Mompesson was a local justice of the peace and a respectable figure in the village. It was said that he had recently acquired a drum, an old military drum that had been used by a drummer during the Civil War. How Mompesson came to possess this drum is unclear, but it was shortly after its arrival that strange events began to occur in his home. It started with faint drumming noises, heard at night, just at the edge of hearing. At first, it was dismissed as a figment of the imagination, a product of the mind playing tricks in the dead of night. But as the nights went on, the sounds grew louder. Soon, the drumming became unmistakable. It was not just a faint tap in the distance. It was clear, loud, and distinct. A drum being played somewhere in the house, echoing through the walls. At first, Mompesson and his family tried to ignore it, assuming it to be a trick of the wind, or perhaps an animal knocking something over in the attic. But the drumming did not stop. In fact, it seemed to get louder each night, its rhythm more insistent. It came at all hours, disturbing their sleep, filling the house with an oppressive sense of unease. But it wasn't just the sound of the drum that disturbed Mompesson and his family. Strange things began to happen around the house. Furniture would be moved from one room to another. Objects would be found in places they had not been left. It seemed as though the house was being disturbed by an invisible presence, one that was not content simply with noise. And then came the whispers, the soft, unintelligible voices that seemed to echo through the rooms, just out of reach. The family's unease grew, and the once comfortable home began to feel more like a haunted prison. Eventually, Mompesson reached out to a local clergyman, hoping to find some explanation or solace in his religious faith. But the disturbances only escalated. The drumming grew louder, and now, people from the village began to hear it as well. Word of the haunting spread through Tedworth, and soon, more and more people claimed to hear the drum beats late at night, each one describing the sound as if it were coming from the walls themselves. It wasn't long before the house became the subject of intense gossip and speculation, with some suggesting that the noises were the result of an angry spirit, or perhaps the ghost of a long-dead soldier seeking revenge. Among the growing number of witnesses, one man, a soldier named John Revel, became particularly involved. Revel, whose name would become forever linked with the case, was an ex-soldier who had served during the English Civil War. It was said that he had been a drummer in one of the Royalist regiments, and it was his drum that had been mysteriously acquired by Mompesson. Revel, though no longer in active service, had a strong connection to the drum and the events surrounding it. He was convinced that the drumming was not a product of superstition or hysteria, but rather the result of something far more sinister. Revel's suspicions were based on a curious detail. He believed that the sounds of the drumming were not random, but rather were deliberate. The beats followed a rhythm, one that seemed to suggest the presence of a human hand. There were no natural explanations for the sound, no way to explain how the drum could play itself with such precision. The beats were not the result of the wind or the house settling, they were intentional, and the source, Revel believed, lay within the drum itself. As the haunting continued, local authorities became involved, and what began as a private matter soon escalated into a public spectacle. A well-known physician, Dr. Thomas Bartholin, was called in to examine the house and the family. Bartholin, a man of science, was skeptical of the supernatural claims, but was nonetheless intrigued by the reports. He investigated the house thoroughly, trying to find any logical explanations for the phenomena. But despite his efforts, he could not explain the drumming, nor the strange occurrences that seemed to happen in the house. Bartholin's conclusion was that the events were either the result of mass hysteria or an unknown natural phenomenon, perhaps even the product of the environment itself, a strange combination of acoustics and vibration. But there was another theory, one that suggested a more unsettling possibility. What if the phantom drummer was not a ghost at all, but a man, a living person, hiding in the shadows, orchestrating the whole affair? Could it be that someone with a deep knowledge of the house's layout and the family's routines was behind the events? Perhaps, it was suggested, someone was using the haunting as a form of psychological manipulation, or even to enact some form of revenge. It is known that Mompesson had made enemies over the years, and there were several individuals who might have had the motive and means to carry out such a strange act. Despite various attempts to solve the mystery, the drumming persisted for months, and no definitive explanation ever surfaced. The final resolution of the case remains elusive, with some scholars suggesting that the events at Tedworth were part of a larger pattern of supernatural occurrences in 17th century England. Many people believed in the power of spirits and ghosts, and during this time it was not uncommon for unexplained events to be attributed to the supernatural. But was that the real cause? Or were the events a product of the tense social and political atmosphere of the time, as England was recovering from the turmoil of the Civil War and navigating the fragile waters of the Restoration period? The haunting stopped as suddenly as it had begun. The drumming ceased, and the disturbances in the house came to an end. Mompesson's family, no longer tormented by the mysterious presence, eventually moved on, and the house was left in peace. Yet the story of the phantom drummer lived on, passed down through the generations, a strange and unsettling reminder of the mysteries that still elude understanding. Was it a true haunting, a ghostly manifestation of a soldier's unrest? Or was it an elaborate hoax, a carefully crafted psychological experiment, or perhaps a tale of vengeance? No one can say for sure. What remains undeniable is the lingering sense of unease that the phantom drummer continues to evoke, even centuries after the drumming stopped. The mystery of the phantom drummer of Tedworth may never be fully explained, but in its uncertainty, it remains one of the most perplexing and unnerving chapters in England's long and storied history. What, if anything, might still be hidden in the echoes of those spectral beats? The year was 1879, and a small rural village in Ireland, known as Knock, had recently become the site of an event that would later be described as one of the most remarkable and enduring mysteries of the 19th century. Nestled among the rolling hills of County Mayo, the Knock Shrine, a humble, unassuming place, would become the backdrop for an inexplicable occurrence, an event that to this day remains the subject of intense speculation and intrigue: the strange mass vision at Knock. On the evening of August 21st, as dusk fell over the small village, a group of witnesses, most of them locals, gathered near the parish church. It was an ordinary evening, one of those quiet, routine moments in life that would have passed without note if not for what they were about to experience. The group included men, women, and children, ordinary people who had no reason to expect that the evening would unfold in such an extraordinary manner. Around 8 p.m., as the sun began to set, something unexpected occurred. A light appeared in the sky. According to the reports of those who were present, it was not the fading light of the day, nor the flicker of any earthly fire. It was a soft, radiant glow, almost ethereal in quality, that illuminated the area near the church. The light grew brighter, and as it did, the witnesses began to see shapes materialize in the sky, shapes that would later be described as otherworldly and divine. As the light intensified, a vision began to take form. There, before the gathered group, appeared 3 figures, an event so extraordinary that those present could scarcely believe their eyes. The first was a figure of the Virgin Mary, her presence calm and serene, dressed in flowing robes. Beside her stood Saint Joseph, the earthly father of Jesus, a figure who stood in silent reverence. On the other side of the Virgin was a third figure, John the Evangelist, a biblical figure who, according to Christian tradition, had been entrusted with the care of Mary after the crucifixion of Christ. But the figures were not the only thing that drew attention. Behind the 3 holy figures stood an altar that seemed to be formed of light. A lamb, symbolizing Christ, stood on this altar, flanked by 2 angels, one on each side, their wings spread wide in a gesture of protection or blessing. The scene was incredibly detailed, but what most struck those who witnessed the vision was the profound sense of peace and calm it inspired. There was no sound, no movement other than the gentle, radiant light. The vision remained, undisturbed, for several moments, before gradually fading from view, leaving the witnesses in stunned silence. In the immediate aftermath, the witnesses, many of whom had no previous connections to the religious fervor that sometimes surrounded such events, described the experience as surreal, even miraculous. What could they have seen, if not a divine manifestation? Was this an apparition from another realm, a heavenly visitation that had broken through the fabric of the natural world? And if it was, why Knock? Why this remote village in Ireland? And why at that specific moment in time? The news of the vision spread quickly, and the following days saw a flood of people arriving in Knock from surrounding towns and even further afield. The shrine soon became a site of pilgrimage, with thousands of visitors arriving each year to witness the spot where the vision had occurred. The event became known as the Knock Apparition, or the Vision of Knock, and it would become a pivotal moment in the history of Irish Catholicism. In the years that followed, various explanations were offered for what had occurred that evening in 1879. Some speculated that it was a collective hallucination, a product of shared expectation among the witnesses, perhaps driven by the religious atmosphere of the time. After all, Ireland in the late 19th century was a deeply Catholic country, one that had witnessed waves of persecution and hardship. Could the vision have been a psychological manifestation, an expression of the collective desire for divine intervention? Others, however, argued that the vision could not have been a mere illusion. The witnesses were not all gathered in a religious context, and many of them were skeptical at first, unsure of what they were seeing. The fact that so many people from different walks of life described the same vision in such detail seemed to rule out the possibility of mass hysteria or shared delusion. Could it have been something else? Something supernatural, or even a divine miracle? The strength of the witnesses' conviction, coupled with the enduring nature of the vision, made it difficult for skeptics to dismiss the event entirely. One theory suggests that the vision could have been a form of religious ecstasy, a phenomenon where an individual or group experiences what they perceive to be a divine revelation. The emotional and psychological state of the witnesses might have played a role in shaping the vision, but it would not explain the consistency and clarity of the imagery reported by so many people. Yet there are those who have ventured even further into speculative territory, suggesting that the vision might not have been religious in nature at all. Could it have been a natural phenomenon? An optical illusion caused by atmospheric conditions? Some have suggested that the glow might have been the result of an unusual interplay of light and weather, a rare meteorological event that created the illusion of figures in the sky. While such an explanation remains highly speculative, it does raise the question of whether there might be natural causes that are still beyond our understanding, phenomena that science has yet to fully explain. And then there are those who have linked the vision to older traditions of divine manifestations, believing that the sighting at Knock was merely the latest in a long history of similar apparitions. Throughout history, there have been numerous reports of religious visions, from the appearance of the Virgin Mary at Lourdes to the apparitions at Fatima in Portugal. Some have argued that the Knock vision was simply a continuation of this tradition, a divine communication with the people of Ireland, chosen for reasons that remain hidden from human understanding. The Irish government and church authorities, perhaps unsurprisingly, took a cautious approach in the aftermath of the vision. The Catholic Church did not officially recognize the event as a miracle for several decades, despite the ongoing pilgrimages and testimonies. It wasn't until 1936, when the church officially declared the site of Knock to be a place of pilgrimage, that the event was acknowledged with formal recognition. But the mystery remains. What was it that the people of Knock truly saw that night? Was it a divine message, a sign from beyond the veil? Or was it something else? An optical illusion, a shared vision, or a manifestation of something deep within the human psyche? The answers remain elusive, and as with so many great mysteries of history, the full truth may never be known. The strange mass vision at Knock Shrine continues to haunt the collective imagination. It challenges our understanding of reality, religion, and the mysteries of human perception. And as time passes, it becomes clear that the vision, though it has faded from public view in many ways, still lingers in the minds of those who seek to understand the boundaries between the known world and the unknown. What, then, was the vision at Knock? A sign from the heavens? Or an extraordinary trick of the mind? Whatever it was, the event remains one of the most enigmatic and profound mysteries of the 19th century. And as we look back on it, we are left to wonder, are there still forces, unknown and unseen, that move through the world, waiting to reveal themselves in ways we can neither predict nor understand? In the latter half of the 16th century, amid the sprawling forests and unsettled coastline of North America, one of the most confounding mysteries in English colonial history took place. The lost colony of Roanoke, a name now synonymous with unexplained disappearances, remains a haunting enigma. But it wasn't just the fate of the first settlers of Roanoke Island that has perplexed historians. It's the mysterious disappearance of the English Roanoke Relief Expedition in the late 1500s that deepens the intrigue surrounding the colony. The relief expedition was dispatched in 1591, a full 3 years after the last confirmed contact with the colony. The colony, founded under the auspices of Sir Walter Raleigh, had been struggling with harsh conditions, food shortages, fraught relations with Native American tribes, and internal discord. By the time the relief expedition, commanded by John White, finally set sail from England, the fate of the original settlers was already uncertain. The expedition, a desperate attempt to supply the beleaguered colony and reinstate its dwindling population, set off into the Atlantic, its ships laden with provisions and hopes of reunification. The journey across the vast ocean would take months, and even as they reached the shores of the New World, the expedition's officers could have hardly imagined the chilling puzzle they were about to uncover. Upon arrival in the summer of 1591, the relief party found Roanoke Island completely deserted. The settlement, once teeming with life, was eerily quiet, its structures abandoned and in disrepair. There were no signs of conflict, no bodies, no remnants of the desperate fight for survival that one might expect if the settlers had met an untimely end. Only the remnants of the familiar, their tools, their homes, and a cryptic message carved into a post, remained. The words Croatoan were etched into the wood. But beyond that, there was no explanation, no clue as to the whereabouts or fate of the settlers, no signs of struggle, no bodies, no sign of any tragic end. It was as if they had vanished into thin air. The name Croatoan referred to a nearby island, inhabited by a Native American tribe of the same name, which led many to believe the settlers had moved there for safety or out of necessity. But when John White, the commander of the relief expedition, attempted to find the Croatoan island, he was thwarted by a violent storm, which forced him to turn back without further investigation. As such, the mystery of what had happened to the settlers of Roanoke Island and why they had disappeared remained unresolved. For centuries, historians have debated what might have caused the strange vanishing. One prevailing theory is that the settlers, facing starvation and mounting difficulties, may have made the difficult decision to leave Roanoke Island and seek refuge with the Croatoan tribe. But why then would they leave behind everything? Tools, supplies, and even their homes, if they were not in a state of extreme duress? Would they not have taken more? Or at least left behind more clues to their survival? Other theories posit that the settlers were the victims of a massacre, either by the Croatoan or by another hostile Native American tribe, but this doesn't seem to align with the lack of any visible signs of violence at the settlement. The tools were intact, the structures still standing, and most importantly, there were no bodies. Such an event would surely have left behind evidence of conflict, yet none was found. A darker theory suggests that the settlers themselves may have simply disappeared due to internal conflict or mass hysteria. It's possible that some of the colonists may have turned on one another in desperation, or that a group might have abandoned the settlement for unknown reasons, taking what little they had with them. But then, there is the theory that touches on the truly speculative. Could the settlers of Roanoke have stumbled upon a secret so great that it compelled them to vanish from history altogether? Could their disappearance be part of a larger, more intricate mystery? One involving a lost civilization, or even supernatural forces beyond the understanding of the time. This, of course, delves into territory uncharted by the more established narratives of history, but it has not stopped generations of theorists from offering their own speculative explanations. The story of Roanoke has not only captivated historians, but also inspired generations of writers, filmmakers, and conspiracy theorists who have sought to uncover the truth behind what truly happened on that fateful island. In fact, the name Roanoke has become synonymous with lost hope, tragedy, and the unknown. One particularly curious development came in the early 20th century, when certain claims were made that evidence of the Roanoke settlers could still be found in parts of the Carolinas. In the 1930s, a group of researchers uncovered artifacts that seemed to suggest a connection between the settlers and local tribes, pointing to the possibility of interaction or even forced assimilation. While these findings remain unconfirmed and often contested, they do add to the list of unresolved mysteries surrounding the lost colonists. But after more than 400 years, the ultimate question remains: where did the settlers of Roanoke go? Were they victims of circumstance, simply trying to survive a harsh environment with limited resources? Were they victims of betrayal, violence, or internal collapse? Or did they, in the midst of their abandonment, choose to disappear from history altogether, leaving only fleeting remnants of their existence behind? The story of the Roanoke colony is one of those haunting, unsettling mysteries that reminds us of the fragility of human history. It raises questions about the nature of survival, the limits of what we can truly know about the past, and the haunting possibility that, no matter how much we may want to uncover, some secrets are destined to remain forever lost to time. Perhaps, as with so many other mysteries of history, the answers are out there, waiting to be found. But will we ever truly be able to unlock them? The lost colony of Roanoke remains a compelling enigma, one that will likely continue to provoke the curiosity of future generations. The year was 1100, a time of turbulent politics and shifting allegiances in medieval England. King William II, also known as William Rufus, was on the hunt. The sun was just beginning to dip below the horizon as he and his companions ventured into the dense, dark forests of the New Forest, a hunting ground in Hampshire, England, known for its wild beauty and treacherous landscape. The king's party had arrived there to enjoy a day of sport, but by the end of the day, one of the most mysterious deaths in English history would unfold. The king's death, as it was first reported, seemed as if it were merely a tragic accident. A stray arrow, launched during a hunt, struck King William II in the chest, a sharp, sudden blow, deadly and swift. But there was something deeply unsettling about the circumstances surrounding this event. A king, beloved by some but reviled by others, struck down in the prime of his life. Was it truly just an accident? Or was there something far more sinister at play in that fateful moment? William Rufus was the second son of William the Conqueror, the first Norman king of England. He had ascended the throne after the death of his father in 1087, an event that caused a division among his brothers. Despite his youth, William II was crowned swiftly. He was a man of ambition and decisiveness, a king who ruled with strength, but also with cruelty. His reign was marked by controversial decisions, not the least of which was his tense relationship with the church, his demands for ever-increasing taxes, and his conflicts with his own family. The sharp edges of his personality made him both a ruler with power and a deeply divisive figure. As a ruler, William was known for his harsh methods, especially his imposition of taxes on the clergy and his control over the vast land holdings that came with his father's conquests. The church, which wielded considerable influence in England at the time, was particularly resentful of William's tight grip on their wealth and lands. This ongoing friction created an atmosphere of tension, a tension that would have many questioning whether his death could have been the result of something more than an accident. When the news of his death spread, the initial reports did not raise alarm. It was, after all, a common practice for kings to hunt with their entourages, but there was a chilling detail in the story that caught the attention of both contemporaries and later historians. William Rufus was alone when the fatal arrow struck him. The circumstances surrounding his death, however, quickly gave rise to theories and suspicions. The official version, as told by William's companions, claimed that the king had been standing in the woods with his back to a hunting party when the arrow, fired by one of his men, found its mark. It was an arrow shot during the excitement of the hunt, a stray that had been misdirected. William had been killed instantly, but the uncertainty surrounding his death began immediately. If the death had been an accident, why had the king been alone? The hunter who fired the arrow, Walter Tyrrell, was one of the men in the party, yet his proximity to the king and the exact position of the shot were murky at best. Tyrrell, too, claimed that the death was an accident, but many did not find his story convincing. Was it possible that Tyrrell had purposefully aimed the arrow at the king? Or was there some sort of conspiracy, an assassination dressed up as a hunting accident? The timing of William Rufus's death only deepened the mystery. The king had been in a precarious position, embroiled in political struggles with both his brother, Henry I, and the church. There was also speculation that William's own courtiers, disillusioned with his rule and keen to ensure that his death would lead to a more favorable reign, might have seen his removal as the only path forward. Further compounding the mystery were the strange details surrounding the king's body. When it was discovered lying in the forest, it was not just the manner of his death that left questions. It was the position in which he was found. It was reported that William was laying face down in a position that suggested he had been caught off guard, but the precise way in which he had fallen seemed odd, even deliberate. The arrow, for instance, was said to have struck him in the chest. But was it plausible that such a blow would have come from such a great distance, from a random shot, or was it a carefully aimed strike, timed with the right moment? Moreover, William Rufus's body was not immediately removed from the scene. His companions did not rush to his side or attempt to provide any aid. Instead, they seemed strangely indifferent, leaving the body in the forest for a time before bringing it to the church at Winchester for burial. Why this delay? Were they in shock, or was there something more to the timing of the burial? As the years went on, the mystery of William's death only deepened. Theories began to surface that suggested the involvement of several parties. Some claimed that it was the church, frustrated with William's heavy-handed treatment of clergy, that had orchestrated his death. After all, his antagonism with the church had made him several enemies within its ranks. Others suggested that the political tensions between William and his brother, Henry I, were enough to drive Henry to take action and hasten his own ascension to the throne. William Rufus had no legitimate heirs, and Henry stood to gain considerably from his brother's untimely death. Yet other, more speculative theories suggested that William's death could have been the result of something entirely different, an act of fate, or even the culmination of divine judgment. William Rufus was not a particularly pious man, and his reign was marked by heavy taxation and political maneuvering, all of which had alienated many people. Was his death the result of a higher power, punishing him for his sins? Some conspiracy theories even suggested that the mysterious death of William Rufus was not simply an accident, but rather a premeditated act, planned by a faction of his own court. The motivations behind such a plot would likely have included the desire to end a reign marked by conflict and instability. But could it be that the king was eliminated for reasons other than political advantage? Was there a deeper conspiracy at play, one that reached beyond the politics of the time? Despite centuries of historical investigation, no definitive conclusion has ever been reached. The official story remains that William Rufus was struck down by an accidental shot from an arrow, but this explanation has never fully satisfied those who delve into the lingering mysteries surrounding his death. As with many unsolved historical mysteries, the truth may never be uncovered, leaving us to wonder whether there was more to the death of William II than we can ever truly know. Even now, as we reflect on the life and death of William Rufus, we are left with questions that seem to linger in the shadows of history. Was his death truly an accident, or was it a calculated move by a political rival, a disillusioned subject, or perhaps even by divine retribution? The truth remains elusive, hidden in the dim mists of time, and the death of William II Rufus remains one of England's most enduring and unsettling mysteries. What other secrets might history be concealing, and how many more of the past's most troubling questions will forever remain unanswered? The year was 1607, and the English were in the midst of their ambitious push to establish a foothold in the New World. While Jamestown, Virginia, would soon capture the history books as the first permanent English settlement in North America, another colony, less well known, was struggling to survive on the northern coast of what is now Maine. The Popham colony, a venture backed by wealthy English investors, was founded with high hopes of establishing a successful settlement. But within a year of its founding, the colony mysteriously vanished. By 1608, when a relief expedition arrived from England, they found nothing, no trace of the people who had once called the Popham settlement home. To understand the mystery, we must first imagine the landscape, the rugged, wind-swept shores of the New England coast, a place where the sea crashes against jagged rocks, and dense forests stretch as far as the eye can see. The settlers had arrived in what is now known as Popham Beach in the fall of 1607, under the leadership of George Popham and Raleigh Gilbert. The area was rich with resources, and the settlers quickly set to work building their new homes and establishing relationships with the indigenous Wabanaki people. But as winter descended, the settlers found themselves in a harsh and unforgiving environment. Despite their optimism and the resources available to them, life at Popham was fraught with difficulties. Like most early colonial ventures, the settlers at Popham faced obstacles that made survival difficult. The brutal New England winter was especially hard on those who were not prepared for its challenges. Food was scarce, and while the Wabanaki offered assistance, the settlers had to contend with not just the cold, but with diseases that claimed the lives of several of the men and women. By the time spring arrived, the colony's future looked increasingly uncertain. Despite the hardships, the colony did manage to establish some success. They built a small fort and produced a number of tools and products, including a rudimentary ship, the Virginia, which was intended to help them trade with England. But by 1608, the situation had become untenable. The colony was plagued by internal disputes, food shortages, and the deaths of several of its settlers. By the time a relief expedition, led by Captain John Smith of Jamestown fame, arrived to offer aid, the settlement was eerily quiet. When the relief party arrived, they found no sign of life. The houses were abandoned, the fort stood empty, and the fields had been left untended. A detailed search of the area revealed no bodies, no signs of violence, no messages left behind by the missing settlers, just the haunting remnants of a settlement that had been hastily abandoned. As with so many mysterious disappearances in history, there was no immediate explanation. What had happened to the Popham colony? Where had the settlers gone? And why had they left so suddenly, so quietly? Theories abound, but the truth remains elusive. Some historians believe that the settlers, having endured months of hardship, decided to leave the area in search of a more hospitable environment. But why would they leave behind everything they had worked for, leaving their fort, tools, and supplies untouched? Could they have simply given up on the idea of settlement? Or was there another force at work? Some suggest that the settlers may have attempted to return to England, though the journey was perilous and made even more so by the shifting currents and unpredictable weather. Others believe that the settlers may have attempted to integrate with the local indigenous tribes, either for survival or because they saw the Wabanaki as their best hope for survival in a harsh land. But no historical evidence supports this theory. There are no records of the Wabanaki taking in the Popham settlers, and there is no mention of the settlers in later accounts from the tribes of the area. Another possibility is that the Popham settlers fell victim to the same sort of misfortune that befell other early English colonies: disease. Smallpox, dysentery, and other illnesses could have wiped out much of the population in a short amount of time. It is possible that the settlers' bodies were quickly consumed by the elements, leaving nothing behind but the remains of their abandoned homes. But this theory doesn't account for the absence of any evidence of disease, and it leaves open the question of why there were no signs of a struggle or resistance. Could the settlers have been attacked by the local Native American tribes, perhaps in retaliation for their encroachment on land that had been in indigenous hands for centuries? This theory, though it has some merit, is equally unsubstantiated by the historical record. While there were tensions between English settlers and Native American groups, particularly in the early years of colonial expansion, there is no concrete evidence that the settlers of Popham were targeted in a violent manner by the Wabanaki. There were reports of peaceful interactions between the settlers and the Wabanaki, and it is unlikely that an attack would have gone unrecorded, especially by the relief expeditions that arrived shortly afterward. Another theory, one that is more speculative but nonetheless intriguing, is that the Popham colony was the victim of a secret plot. Some historians have suggested that the settlers were deliberately abandoned by their own government, left to fail as a means of securing control over the region for more powerful figures in England. Could the colony have been seen as a failure from the outset? A sacrifice to the larger geopolitical ambitions of those in power? If so, why leave no evidence of such a plot? Why would those who orchestrated the abandonment leave behind only cryptic clues and haunting silence? One possibility is that, in a time when survival in the New World was fraught with so many dangers, the settlers themselves may have decided to abandon the colony voluntarily, taking what little they could carry and seeking out new opportunities in a land they had come to realize was too harsh for their survival. If this were the case, it would be a deeply human decision, a desperate bid for survival in a world that seemed to offer little hope. As time passes, the fate of the Popham colony continues to be a point of historical speculation, but with little to no concrete evidence, the mystery persists. The remains of the colony, along with the eerie silence of the abandoned settlement, are a testament to the fragility of early colonial ventures and the hardships faced by those who sought to carve out a future in an unforgiving land. The fate of the settlers remains a haunting enigma, a story of ambition, failure, and the unforgiving forces of nature. As we look back on the remnants of the Popham colony, we are left to wonder, what truly happened to the settlers who vanished so mysteriously in 1608? Were they victims of the harsh environment, internal discord, or something far darker? The answers may never be found, but the mystery of Popham continues to be a reminder of the many secrets that remain buried in the pages of history. In the late 1790s, in the tranquil, pastoral English countryside, rumors began to swirl around the Tichborne estate, an ancestral home that stood proud in the region of Hampshire. From the outside, nothing seemed amiss. But behind the ivy-covered walls of Tichborne Hall, a strange and unsettling mystery was quietly beginning to unfold. A case that would captivate the public imagination, tear apart families, and remain one of the most bizarre and controversial episodes in legal history. It all began with the sudden disappearance of Sir Roger Tichborne, the heir to the Tichborne estate, in 1791. Sir Roger was a young, handsome man, the sole heir to his family's fortune, and his sudden absence left a void that no one could have predicted. While the circumstances of his disappearance were never fully understood, it was widely assumed that he had died at sea during a shipwreck while traveling to South America. For years, the family mourned their lost heir, and the estate fell into a precarious position, with the future uncertain. But in 1834, a startling claim emerged that would forever alter the course of the Tichborne family history. A man, unremarkable in appearance but with a mysterious story, arrived in England. His name was Arthur Orton, and he claimed to be none other than Sir Roger Tichborne, the long-lost heir to the Tichborne fortune. At first glance, Orton seemed a strange candidate for the role. He was a butcher from Wapping, a poor working-class district in London with no real connection to the aristocratic Tichborne family. His physical appearance, too, did not match the image of Sir Roger. Orton was heavier, rougher, and lacked the refined features one might expect of a nobleman. Yet, Orton insisted, with fervor and confidence, that he was indeed the missing heir. His claim was built not just on a personal belief, but on a tangled web of stories, testimonies, and evidence that, on the surface, seemed to suggest a plausible truth. Orton's story was that he had survived the shipwreck, had been washed ashore in South America, and spent the following years living in exile under a new identity. His memory, he claimed, had been clouded by the trauma of the shipwreck, but through a combination of dreams, visions, and mysterious occurrences, he had remembered his true identity as Sir Roger Tichborne. He had come back to claim what was rightfully his. At first, few took him seriously, but Orton's determination, coupled with his genuine belief in his story, began to sway people. The Tichborne family, who had long since resigned themselves to the idea that their heir was lost forever, were initially skeptical, but they were also intrigued. After all, Orton could recall personal details about Sir Roger's life, things only the true heir would know. He seemed to know about family matters, private conversations, and other details that would have been impossible for an impostor to glean. As word spread, Orton began to garner support. The people of Tichborne, who had known the family for generations, started to believe that perhaps this was the real Sir Roger, returned from the dead. Even Sir Roger's own mother, Lady Tichborne, after spending years grieving her son, began to entertain the possibility that this man might indeed be her son returned to her. But the more they probed into Orton's story, the more inconsistencies began to surface. His demeanor was rough and unpolished, nothing like the educated, refined heir that Sir Roger had been known to be. He had trouble speaking with the proper etiquette and appeared unfamiliar with some of the finer details of aristocratic life. Furthermore, his physical appearance was strikingly different from that of Sir Roger. This disparity led some to question whether Orton's claim could be true, or if something more sinister was at play. And yet, despite these doubts, Orton's claim gained traction. He secured a lawyer and took legal action to reclaim the Tichborne inheritance. The case went to court in 1871, and what followed would become a protracted and sensational trial that gripped the nation for years. The trial centered not just around Orton's identity, but also on the question of whether he truly was Sir Roger Tichborne, or merely a man who had managed to fabricate an extraordinary story. As the court hearings progressed, it became clear that there was far more to the case than met the eye. Witnesses from all walks of life were called to testify, each offering pieces of the puzzle. Some claimed that Orton resembled Sir Roger, while others said he bore no resemblance at all. The medical experts were divided, with some asserting that Orton's features could have been altered by time and circumstance, while others dismissed the idea that he could ever have been the Tichborne heir. The testimony of the Tichborne family members was equally mixed. Some believed, others were certain that this man was an impostor. For years, Orton fought valiantly in court. He offered documents, letters, and even testimonies from people he had encountered in his supposed life in South America, all of which seemed to lend weight to his claim. Yet there were glaring contradictions that could not be ignored. It became increasingly apparent that Orton's memory was unreliable, his knowledge of Sir Roger's life inconsistent, and his story evolving in ways that raised doubts. He had failed to provide any conclusive evidence that he was, in fact, Sir Roger Tichborne. As the trial dragged on, the public's fascination with the case grew. For years, the mystery of the Tichborne heir captivated the imagination of the people. Was Arthur Orton the rightful heir, returned from the dead? Or was he a man with a cunning, elaborate deception, seeking to claim the fortune that did not belong to him? The trial finally reached its conclusion in 1874, when the jury ruled that Orton was not Sir Roger Tichborne. He was, instead, convicted of perjury and fraud, and his claim to the Tichborne estate was dismissed. Orton was sentenced to prison, but his story did not end there. Even after his conviction, he maintained that he was the real heir, and there were some who continued to support him. His case would linger in public consciousness for decades to come. So, what of the mystery? Was Orton the true heir, or merely a man driven by delusion or greed? The strange case of the Tichborne heir raises more questions than it answers, inviting speculation about identity, memory, and the lengths to which people will go to claim what they believe is theirs. The case of Arthur Orton and the Tichborne heir has left an indelible mark on legal history. It is a story of ambition, deception, and the desperate desire to find meaning in the midst of loss. Yet, as we look back on the strange events surrounding the Tichborne family, we are left to wonder, could there have been a kernel of truth in Orton's claim? What motivates a man to so thoroughly embody a life that may not be his? And in the end, who was the real Sir Roger Tichborne? The answers remain lost to history, leaving us with more questions than conclusions. In the heart of rural Warwickshire, England, nestled between undulating hills and rolling green meadows, lies the site of one of the most curious and unsettling occurrences in English history: Edgehill. On the surface, it is an ordinary landscape, quiet and serene, with the occasional rustle of wind through the trees and the distant bleating of sheep. Yet beneath this tranquil exterior lies a dark and mysterious chapter from the English Civil War, the strange sightings of a phantom army that have continued to haunt the area for centuries. The year was 1642, and the country was in the midst of one of its most turbulent conflicts, the English Civil War. The Royalists, loyal to King Charles I, clashed with the parliamentarians, who sought to limit the monarchy's power. The Battle of Edgehill, fought on October 23, 1642, would be the first major engagement of the war. The battlefield, spanning a swath of open farmland, was the site of brutal violence as thousands of soldiers on both sides faced off in a bloody struggle that would end inconclusively. Though neither side claimed a clear victory, the battle would prove to be a harbinger of the chaos and devastation that lay ahead. In the aftermath of the battle, the site would not remain silent. Over the following months and years, strange stories began to surface, accounts of ghostly figures, of spectral soldiers marching across the fields, and of the distant sound of drums echoing through the mist. Some said that they had seen figures in tattered uniforms, their faces obscured, wandering aimlessly along the hills where the battle had raged. Others claimed to have heard the unmistakable sound of soldiers' footsteps, the clanking of armor, and the thudding of hooves, though no one could be seen. Over time, these reports became more frequent, and Edgehill itself became known as a place where the past refused to remain buried. One of the earliest and most detailed accounts of the phenomena comes from a local innkeeper who claimed to have seen a procession of ghostly soldiers marching past his establishment late at night. He described them as being dressed in the distinctive uniforms of the Royalist and Parliamentarian armies, though their faces were either hidden or distorted in some way, as if they were not fully part of the present world. He spoke of hearing their muffled conversations, although the words were never clear, as if they existed in some half-remembered space between the living and the dead. According to the innkeeper, The soldiers moved in complete silence, as if unaware of the world around them, yet their presence was undeniable. The sightings became more frequent in the years that followed, with other witnesses reporting similar encounters. Some claimed to have seen the ghosts of soldiers standing still in the mist, frozen in place as though they were caught in a moment of time that had never passed. Others reported hearing the sound of galloping hooves, only to look up and see nothing but empty fields. A few individuals even claimed to have seen an entire phantom army stretching across the hills, as if reenacting the battle that had taken place there nearly 2 decades before. For many, the sightings were nothing more than the product of overactive imaginations or the lingering effects of a traumatic event. War, after all, leaves deep scars on both the land and the people who experience it, and the mind has a tendency to fill in the blanks in the absence of concrete answers. However, others were not so quick to dismiss these events as mere superstition. The consistency and detail of the accounts led some to speculate that the phenomena were connected to the powerful emotions and intense violence that had unfolded on the battlefield. Could it be that the spirits of the soldiers, trapped in the horrors of war, were unable to find peace? Were the sounds of battle, the sights of bloodshed, and the chaos of the day still echoing in the very soil of Edgehill? One of the most compelling aspects of these sightings is the sense of historical continuity they suggest. The soldiers who allegedly appear on the battlefield are not just ghosts of any war, but soldiers who were present at Edgehill in 1642, soldiers who fought and died on that very soil. This specificity raises important questions. How is it that the spirits of these soldiers are able to remain anchored in such a specific location and time? And what is it about the Battle of Edgehill that has caused such a profound and lasting imprint on the landscape? Some suggest that the battle itself may have left an indelible mark on the land, a memory of sorts, which continues to reverberate through the centuries. The concept of place memory, a theory that certain locations retain traces of past events, especially those marked by intense emotion or violence, has been explored in various cultural and psychological studies. Could it be that the Battle of Edgehill, with its slaughter and chaos, created an imprint so strong that it continues to manifest in strange and unexplained ways? Perhaps the soldiers who died there, many of them unknown to history, are still reliving their final moments, trapped in a cycle they cannot escape. There are, of course, more grounded explanations for the phenomena. Some historians have suggested that the sightings are a product of the collective imagination, fueled by the powerful symbolism of the battle and the widespread belief in ghosts during the 17th century. At the time of the English Civil War, belief in spirits was common, and the idea of soldiers returning from the afterlife was not out of the ordinary. Perhaps the eerie sounds and fleeting glimpses of figures were the result of overzealous storytellers, drawing on the public's fascination with the supernatural and their desire to make sense of a brutal and bloody conflict. Others believe that the strange occurrences at Edgehill could be explained by natural phenomena. The region is known for its foggy, mist-laden mornings and evenings, which could create an atmosphere conducive to the perception of ghosts. The optical effects of mist and shadows might distort one's vision, causing the mind to see figures where none exist. Similarly, the sounds of the wind, or even the distant rumble of traffic, could be mistaken for the sounds of galloping horses or the clash of swords, especially in the quiet isolation of the countryside. Yet, despite these rational explanations, the frequency and consistency of the reports, some of which have come from well-respected figures, suggest that something deeper may be at work. There are those who still visit Edgehill today, hoping to catch a glimpse of the phantom army that once marched across the battlefield. Some claim to have seen the ghostly soldiers, while others walk away with only the strange sense of having witnessed something beyond their comprehension. As with many mysteries, the true nature of the phantom army of Edgehill remains unclear. Were these sightings simply the result of overactive imaginations, shaped by a historical narrative steeped in blood and violence? Or was there something more, something that continues to echo through the hills of Warwickshire, a lingering memory of a battle long past, yet never forgotten? In the end, the mystery persists, leaving us to wonder, what is it that ties the spirits of Edgehill to the land, and why do they remain there, locked in an eternal reenactment of a battle that took place centuries ago? The answers, like the fog that often rolls in over the hills, remain elusive, leaving behind only questions that refuse to be fully answered. In the heart of Russia, deep within the opulent walls of Catherine Palace near St. Petersburg, there once existed an unparalleled masterpiece of art and craftsmanship, the Amber Room. Often referred to as the eighth wonder of the world, this room was a stunning display of amber panels, mirrors, gold leaf, and intricate mosaics, all of which seemed to glow with a golden warmth. It was said to be so radiant that even the faintest touch of light on its surface created an ethereal glow, as though the room itself were alive with an otherworldly energy. The Amber Room had been created in the 18th century, a gift from the King of Prussia, Frederick I, to Tsar Peter the Great of Russia. The room was intended to be a symbol of friendship between two great powers of the time. Over the years, it evolved from an intriguing curiosity into an absolute marvel of artistic achievement, with each panel of amber carefully crafted and placed to form intricate designs. It was said that the room was so beautiful that it left visitors speechless, enchanted by its glow, which seemed to infuse the air itself with a rare warmth. Yet, as much as the Amber Room captivated those who beheld it, it is equally known for the most mysterious event of all: its disappearance. The loss of the Amber Room remains one of the most enduring and unsettling mysteries of the 20th century, shrouded in layers of intrigue, conspiracy, and suspicion. Despite numerous investigations and claims of discovery, the question still lingers. What happened to the Amber Room? The Amber Room, which had been relocated to the Catherine Palace during the 18th century, survived for more than 200 years, until World War II. As the war raged across Europe, the room's fate took a drastic turn. In 1941, the German army invaded the Soviet Union. As they advanced through Russia, they reached the outskirts of St. Petersburg. It was at this moment that the Amber Room, with its irreplaceable beauty and immense value, vanished into the shadows of history. The exact circumstances surrounding the room's disappearance are unclear, but many believe that it was carefully dismantled by the invading German forces and shipped to Germany, where it was either hidden, sold, or repurposed. Some have suggested that it was stored in a secret location, hidden away from the eyes of the public. Others have speculated that it was lost in the chaos of the war, either destroyed or disassembled for its valuable amber, gold, and jewels. In the years that followed, the search for the Amber Room became a global obsession. The Nazis were known to have looted countless pieces of art and treasure during their campaign across Europe, but the Amber Room remained an elusive and tantalizing prize. Various reports and rumors circulated, some claiming that it had been hidden in a bunker, while others suggested that it had been sent to an unknown destination. The Nazis themselves were tight-lipped about the room's fate, fueling the mystery even further. After the war, the search for the Amber Room intensified. The Soviet Union, determined to recover this cultural treasure, launched investigations that spanned decades, sending expeditions to various locations across Europe. In 1979, a Soviet scientist named Andrei Anikin claimed that he had located the Amber Room in an abandoned German castle in the Baltic region. Yet, despite extensive searches, no trace of the room was ever found. Other leads were pursued, but nothing concrete ever emerged. The Amber Room remained a shadow, a lost symbol of a time long past, and a mystery that would persist for generations. But as the years passed, a number of theories began to emerge, each one more bizarre and unsettling than the last. Some suggested that the Amber Room had been hidden in plain sight, perhaps buried beneath layers of history, its existence overlooked in the post-war confusion. Others proposed that it had been dismantled and melted down, its precious materials repurposed into other objects of value. Theories even abounded that the Amber Room had been stashed in the vaults of Swiss banks or smuggled into the private collections of wealthy collectors across Europe. Among the more fringe theories, some suggested that the Amber Room's disappearance was not merely the result of looting, but that it had been taken as part of a larger, more elaborate scheme to conceal powerful ancient artifacts. In this view, the Amber Room was more than just a decorative masterpiece. It was an object of hidden significance, a key to unlocking lost knowledge or power. But while these theories have intrigued some, there is little to no hard evidence to support them. In 2003, the Russian government began a massive reconstruction project to restore the Amber Room to its former glory. Over several years, artisans worked tirelessly, using painstaking methods to replicate the room's original design, preserving its radiant beauty for future generations. The reconstructed room, completed in 2003, stands once again in the Catherine Palace, a testament to the craftsmanship of the original and a poignant reminder of its mysterious loss. Yet, despite the restoration, the question remains: where is the original Amber Room? Was it truly lost forever, or does it lie hidden somewhere, waiting to be rediscovered? One of the most perplexing aspects of the Amber Room's disappearance is the sheer number of conflicting stories that have surrounded it over the years. There have been reports from people who claim to have seen it in various locations across Europe, but these accounts have always been unsubstantiated. In the early 1990s, a German art historian named Hans Peter Kloft claimed that he had found evidence that the Amber Room had been stored in the Bavarian Alps, but no physical evidence was ever uncovered. Similarly, other claims surfaced that suggested the room had been hidden in a Russian submarine or even in the back rooms of a wealthy collector's mansion. The most widely accepted theory is that the Amber Room was taken by the Nazis, but its fate after that remains unclear. Some suggest that it may have been lost during the chaos of the war, or that it was destroyed in the bombings of German cities. Others argue that the room's precious amber panels were simply sold to private collectors or melted down for their material value. But the truth remains elusive, buried beneath the weight of time and conflict. As the years pass, the mystery of the Amber Room continues to capture the imagination of those who seek answers. Was it truly lost to history? Or is it still out there, hidden somewhere in the world? Could it have been taken by collectors who recognized its immense value? Or was it destroyed in the aftermath of war? Even as the reconstructed Amber Room stands in St. Petersburg today, its original remains shrouded in mystery. The disappearance of the Amber Room is a haunting reminder of the fragility of history and of how easily the treasures of the past can vanish into the ether. Perhaps one day, someone will uncover the truth, where the Amber Room went and who may still be hiding it. Until then, the mystery lingers, inviting us to wonder, could the original Amber Room still be out there, waiting to be found? Or has it truly been lost to time? In the midst of the great cultural upheavals and political conflicts of the 20th century, the story of the Amber Room's disappearance remains one of the most enduring mysteries of war and art history. As the chaos of World War II raged across Europe, a tangible and irreplaceable treasure was lost to the world. For years, rumors swirled around the possibility that the Amber Room had been hidden in plain sight or buried beneath rubble, waiting to be rediscovered. This sense of hope, however, has been met with repeated disappointment, as each investigation has led to nothing more than dead ends and false leads. The search for the Amber Room has often felt like chasing shadows. In the wake of the war, numerous expeditions were launched to recover it, but each search seemed to fall short. The continued failure to locate any definitive evidence of the room's whereabouts has only deepened the mystery. As time passed, the growing conviction that the room was destroyed, either by the advancing Soviet forces or by other factors, began to take hold. Yet, there are still whispers, faint as they are, suggesting that the Amber Room might yet exist, hidden away from the world in some secret location. The passage of time has only compounded the mystery. Decades after the war ended, art historians and collectors alike have continued to speculate on its whereabouts. The Amber Room's disappearance has sparked countless theories, each more wild and speculative than the last. Was it concealed by a group of Nazi officers who sought to keep its beauty for themselves? Or did it meet its end in a military vault, forgotten among the wreckage of war? Perhaps it was disassembled and sold piece by piece, its precious amber and gold transformed into other treasures to enrich those who recognized its value. Each story, each theory, adds another layer to the already complex web of intrigue surrounding the Amber Room. Some, however, continue to hold out hope that the Amber Room has not been lost forever. As recently as the early 2000s, rumors spread of a hidden cache of Nazi art treasures tucked away in the mountains of Germany or deep within the vaults of private collectors. Was the Amber Room part of these illicit collections? Or has it been silently preserved, waiting for the right moment to be uncovered? In some circles, it is believed that the room may have been smuggled into the hands of collectors who realized its immense value long before its public rediscovery in the early 21st century. In 2003, the ambitious restoration project undertaken by the Russian government provided some closure to the original room's loss. The painstaking reconstruction of the Amber Room, using traditional methods and materials, stands today as a testament to the craftsmanship and artistry of the original. Yet, even as visitors flock to the newly restored room in Catherine Palace, the haunting question remains: what happened to the original Amber Room? Its absence is keenly felt, even as its replica glows with the same golden radiance it once held. It is said that some mysteries are destined to remain unsolved, hidden forever beneath the layers of history, time, and conflict. But the disappearance of the Amber Room may be different. Its fate, buried in the wreckage of war and the tides of history, continues to captivate the imagination of those who seek to uncover the truth. Despite decades of searching, the question remains as perplexing as ever. Was it truly lost, or is there still a chance that the Amber Room exists, waiting to be found?